right now.
Do you guys want me to host today since I'm less involved with the innards?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, actually.
Well, says it's streaming.
Okay, well, I will talk about Ubuntu.
Yep, it's streaming.
It wasn't showing it there for a minute. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. No more Majid. There he is.
Yeah, but you're not on the OBS feed. No.
Sounds like no problem.
Showing a pretty weak signal too. Now
All
you're
right,
in
pick your
red.
articles. Okay. There's two Ubuntu ones.
Maybe you need to do a reboot because you're still not in the OBS stream and I'm getting a real weak signal from you. Okay. Bear with us, folks.
Oh, there's a lot of news.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a problem.
I'll pick some news, Bill.
All right, hang on. I'll get this one. Did you already pick yours, Joe?
I'm reading the first one, but I was letting somebody else pick before I picked another one. Because Majid was saying he wanted the Ubuntu one, but there's two Ubuntu ones, one right after the other.
Oh, okay. I'll let him have the first one then. I didn't hear you say that.
And I will take the first risk support one. And you'll take the second one. I see that. And then you got the Bitwarden.
I can do Bitwarden.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
Then that's who wants the.
And I'll do the Ubuntu Numbat one early on.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the security one. No, can't spell my own
There's
name.
two in security.
Okay, somebody else go get that other one then.
GitLab flaw allowing account hijacking under active exploitation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
right.
I'll take that one. Wow, I thought I wrote long bi-weekly wanderings, and then in comes Majid.
Oh yeah, I wrote a lot. I wrote a lot, didn't I? Flipping out, what's wrong with me?
Nothing.
No, I mean, because normally I don't write that much. I didn't think I did.
I'm good with it.
Well, it's only the three of us, so it's gonna
just the three of us.
We're gonna blaze through this because I mean, without Eric and Moss, I'm not sure I understand where Moss is in all this.
Well, he said he had stuff going on, like he was doing some festival or something.
Okay.
I did what you call I did message Eric actually. He says he's improving.
Okay, good. Is he still in the hospital?
I think he is still in the hospital.
Okay.
Which I did find a bit odd, but then I know you guys keep people in for longer than we do here.
Sometimes Depends on how good your insurance is. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, here it's get you out as soon as humanly possible because there's always
Because it's
lack
the
of beds.
government.
Yeah.
Because the
And
government's involved.
likewise here, if you're, I don't know how much we should talk about this, but if you're on Medicaid or something like that, then they're going to try to get you out as soon as possible. Don't at me, folks.
No, I mean
Well,
to be fair, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's appropriate sometimes, because your rehab is always going to be better at home than it is going to be in a hospital surrounded
Right.
by sick people. So,
well, it's
As long as that's the criteria,
yeah,
though,
exactly. As long as
and
that's the
not
criteria. Which, to be fair, I mean, I know I complain a lot about the NHS, but there's a lot to be said for it.
yeah.
you won't get any argument out of us on that one.
No, you will not.
Because it's a crap show here, the way insurance works.
I know, and what gets me actually is the fact that there are people here that seem to think that the American system is something to ape, and you're really like, you
Look,
obviously don't know anything about healthcare.
they once tried to get me to pay $10,000 for a ambulance ride from my the place that we were renting to the hospital that was about 8 miles away.
It's
Tap
just
on your
it's
mic
it,
real quick, Joe. You're sounding kind of hollow. Yep, that's right.
Am I sounding okay?
Yeah, you sound perfect.
Okay, good.
Is that better?
Louder.
It's louder,
Yeah.
but not better.
Yeah, I'd say it's better too. You're not getting as much reverb as you were before. Alrighty then.
I mean, I could always double check because I know I connected.
It sounds perfect now, actually, the more you talk.
Oh, hold on. It's not going to sound perfect now, I hope.
No, that sucked.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Tick. 1, 2. Okay, so that's on the right one. Are we ready for the ones, the twos, and the threes?
Audio. Wait a minute. Audio. What the heck's going on with Audacity?
Problems with Audacity, Bill. Never have thought it.
It won't let me monitor. Let me see something here. Audio check. Audio. Okay. But I'm using the app image from the website. Huh. God knows. Okay. Who wants to do the 3, 2, 1?
I can do it.
Sure.
3, 2, 1. Record. All right, so that's our 30 seconds done. So coming up for the 3, 2, 1s. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ooh, that was good.
Excellent. Take it away.
Got to find my radio voice. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 437. This is episode 437.5. Recorded on Sunday, May 12th, 2024. It's already hot here. I'm Joe.
Wishing it was still Friday. I'm Bill.
Surrounded by northern lights, I'm Majid.
First up in the news, Mint Monthly News for April. Ubuntu 24.04 released. Ubuntu 24.10 codename revealed. Systemd introduces Run Zero. Google threatens RISC-V support for Android. RISC-V OS arrives. And Bitwarden launches multi-factor authentication for Android and iOS. In security and privacy, a new ransomware threat is found, and a GitLab maximum security flaw is found. Then in our wanderings, Majid endeavors to fail, Bill endeavors to succeed, and Joe gets skimmed. In our innard section, we're going to discuss some best practices for good hygiene and safety when utilizing technology. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. First up in the news, Mint Monthly News for April 2024. The beta test for the new Fastly repositories is continuing. This is a long test, and the more people join it, the better. The Fastly CDN, Content Delivery Network, and its caching mechanisms are extremely impressive. Unlike the current Mint repository servers, which are located in one place and have a maximum bandwidth capacity, the Fastly network replicates the cache's data to make it available anywhere in the world, consistently at fast speed, without downtime or slowdowns. A new partnership with Datadog was announced. Datadog specializes in data. It's not just monitoring and log analysis. They provide an incredibly customizable set of tools which lets you define your parsers, metrics, dimensions, and basically get the information you want analyzed and monitored in real time. The stats Mint shared last month, which showed the popularity of each Linux Mint edition, were powered by Datadog. Note, this data comes from the traffic on the download pages of the Mint websites. No telemetry is collected inside the OS. Mint 22 will feature a pre-installed web app for Matrix using Element as a front end. If you want to use different Matrix client, you'll be able to modify it or delete it. Of course, you don't need to wait for Mint 22 to connect to the Linux Mint space on Matrix. You can simply head over to link in the show notes. Clem talks about giving XApps more independence to enable them to work better with more distributions. XApps should be its own organization with its own GitHub repositories, chat room, website, etc. It should be a space which facilitates collaboration, compatibility, and the development of application which works everywhere, not just apps which are needed or maintained by us. If we want other developers and other projects to work together on compatible software and common solutions, we need a space like XApp. But this space needs to be independent of any DE and any distribution for everyone to feel equal and to feel welcome, not just on paper, but in general, in discussions, empowerment, and decision-making. XApp is on Matrix, link in the show notes. Everyone is welcome. Clem goes on to talk about libadwaita is for GNOME only. The Adwaita theme will be removed from the list of available themes in Cinnamon 6.2. Adwaita will be blacklisted in Cinnamon. Mate and XFCE should probably also do it since it looks just as bad on any non-GNOME desktop. Finally, the importance of Flatpak verification is discussed. In FlatHub, a verified app is an app that is published by its original developer or a third party approved by the developer. Right now, only 42% of Flatpaks have been verified by FlatHub. The store is actively trying to verify apps, especially now after the XZ story and the multiple times malware was injected in the Snap store. In Mint 22, the software manager will not show unverified Flatpaks by default. This will be opt-in. When shown, unverified apps will have a score of 0. The score can help a user build trust towards the application, but the issue here isn't the application. It's the fact that the maintainers aren't who people think they are. When shown, unverified apps will be clearly marked as unverified. By the time any malware hits FlatHub, we hope these measures and the measures taken by FlatHub will have minimized the number of exposed users and raised awareness around the risks which are being taken. The Mint team is fully aware this goes against convenience and will hurt Linux Mint a little bit. It might not be a popular decision, but they think it is a very important one.
So there's a lot to unpack here, isn't there?
Well, there sure is.
Yeah, I mean,
Pretty big announcement.
yeah, I know. I mean, normally we complain that the Mint news is all very kind of, sparse, but actually there's quite a lot here. So, I mean, one, I suppose, is the discussion around XApps. I've seen this around on the internet. Other places people have been talking about it. I think we might have even discussed it last time around, maybe on OTC. I can't remember. And it seems like how do I put this? It's like trying to say that, look, X apps aren't a mint thing. They should be for everybody. It should work on everything, and give some consistency. The interesting thing, I suppose, with that announcement is also the second announcement about getting rid of libadwaita, because that was kind of Gnome's way of trying to make everything look very similar and have a specific design ethic. And seems to be a big deal. At least it seems to be a big deal to me that it's blacklisted in Cinnamon. I mean, that seems a little. I won't say it seems like a big decision. Put it that way. So yes, there's quite a few things in here. I like the flat pack thing. About unverified flat packs and stuff. If we're going to be if we're going to complain about crap in the Snap store, then it's only a matter of time before there's crap in the flat pack store, and so it's important that there's some kind of oversight. So as I said, there's a lot here. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that I'd like to see the X apps show up as flat packs. To be honest, if you want to make them available for everybody, the best way to do that, because they're not in the Debian repos, they're just not. They're in the. If you're an Arch user, you can get them from the AUR, but they're not. If
That's a
you
very
want to
good
use
point,
them,
actually. Yeah, you need to
yeah,
be able to access them as well, isn't it?
right. And that being said, the easiest way to make that happen is just make them available as flat packs. That's, I mean, that I'm not a developer, so I understand that the difference between saying that's a great idea and actually executing on it is probably, there's probably quite a distance there. But yeah, Libid Weta and the Adwaita theme, I do understand that's two very different things, and I'm not sure how much love the Adwaita theme, as it were, gets anymore, because I just don't know anybody that uses it on anything other than GNOME anymore, because there's just so many better themes for other desktops. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know of any distribution that's using it as the default theme for their desktop. Not even on Arch. If you install something other than GNOME, will you get the Adwaita theme on it? So I don't have a huge problem with that.
No, it just seems a little bit. As I said, it just seems a big decision to literally remove it.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, the whole point about Linux is choice, right? You can be, you can choose to have crap icons in the theme if you want.
Yeah, I suppose so. Your video's froze up, by the way.
Oh, okay, I have no idea why. Oh, my webcam's gone. Why is my webcam gone? Oh God,
Gosh dang Linux.
this Endeavor thing is not going well, is it? And
Yeah.
we haven't even got to the bi-weeklies yet.
More on that later. Watch this space. So
okay, yes, I have absolutely no idea when my video has disappeared. No idea.
maybe it'll come back.
Okay. Anyway, Ubuntu 24.04 LTS Noble Number has been released. So this is all the way around on the internet. 2404 LTS, codename number, is here. Release continues Ubuntu's proud tradition of integrating the latest and greatest open source technologies into a high quality, easy to use Linux distro. The team has been hard at work through this cycle, together with the community and our partners, to introduce new features and fix bugs. Our 10th long term supported release sets a new standard in performance. Ubuntu Desktop brings the Security installer to an LTS for the first time, the Flutter based one. In addition to a refreshed user experience and a minimal install by default, the installer now includes experimental support for ZFS and TPM-based full disk encryption and the ability to import auto-install configurations. Post-install, users will be greeted with the latest GNOME 46 alongside a new App Center and firmware updater. NetPlan is now the default networking configuration and supports bidirectionality with Network Manager. Ubuntu now enables frame pointers by default on 64-bit architectures to enable CPU and off-CPU profiling for workload optimization, alongside a suite of critical performance tools pre-installed. The Linux 6.8 kernel now enables low latency features by default for IoT vendors leveraging 32-bit ARM hardware. ARM HF build has been updated to resolve the upcoming 2038 issue by implementing 64-bit time in all necessary packages. As always, Ubuntu ships with the latest toolchain versions. .NET 8 is now fully supported on this and the previous LTS for the full life cycle of the release, and OpenJDK 21 and 17 are both TCK certified to adhere to Java interoperability standards. Ubuntu 24.04 ships Rust 1.75 and a simpler Rust toolchain snap framework to enable future Rust versions to be delivered to developers on this release in the years to come. Newest Edge Ubuntu, Kubuntu, Lubuntu, Ubuntu Budgie, Ubuntu Cinema, Ubuntu Kylin, Ubuntu Mate, Ubuntu Studio, Ubuntu Unity, and Xubuntu are also being released. More details can be found at the individual release notes on the official favors section. There are links in the show notes. Maintenance updates will be provided for 5 years for Ubuntu Desktop, Ubuntu Server, Ubuntu Cloud, and Ubuntu Core. All the remaining flavors will be supported for 3 years. Additional security support is available with ESM, that is Extended Security Maintenance. So, I after my last week's failure to update, last time's failure to update, and just as well as Poppy explained why, I did actually put this on a fresh install of this on the Dell XPS, which I recently acquired, and it's good. The new installer looks nice. It's pretty performant. It's obviously Snap first, so if you wanted to get deb packages, it's the command line or getting something like gdebi to try and do that graphically. And I think I always saying something is boring when you're referring to an LTS, I think is actually a good thing, because what it means is that it's stable and hopefully will be stable for some time. Now, I am aware that nearly always there's an issue with the actual release, and lots of people always say wait for the .01 version of it. So, I mean, I've gotten if you like Ubuntu, it's the best of Ubuntu out there. If you don't like Ubuntu, there's probably nothing here that would convince you to change your mind. But it seems to be a pretty solid release. Have either of you guys tried it out?
No, not yet. I mean, the only place
Nope.
I've got Ubuntu installed is on the servers, and they're both running 22.04, and I probably won't update those until 24.10 comes out, and then I'll go to 24.04. But as far as servers go, it's one of those things where, gosh, if it works, why?
Yeah,
Would I do
exactly.
that?
Yeah, exactly. There's no real need to change it. I mean, looking at the flavors, I've downloaded a couple of the flavors to try out, but I haven't actually done that yet. I would have gone for Kubuntu, but it's still on Plasma 5.27 because Plasma 6 was released just a bit too close to the deadline. So it's
Now,
most likely that it will be 24.10 when Plasma 6 becomes the default,
well, you
which is a
say
little
that.
bit
I wonder.
disappointing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I understand why it happened. I wonder if the backports PPA is sending Plasma 6 to
May well be.
2204.
May well be. I mean, interestingly, KDE Neon. I mean, I know KDE Neon's a completely different beast, but I mean, it's still running on 2204, and still has a Linux kernel of 6.7 and Plasma 6. And so, if they can do it, I'm sure it can be done in other ways for these official flavors. But that might be. I know they're completely different things, so maybe it's not the best example, actually. Yeah, I'm gonna see. I've downloaded Ubuntu Cinnamon and Ubuntu Unity and Lomiri as well. Actually, that's not mentioned here. The one with basically Unity 8 on it. Another one
Oh,
of Rudra Saraswat's endeavors. Ooh, yeah, funny. Yeah, that pun wasn't intended. Actually, there's going to be
no,
lots
but
of
it was
Endeavor puns in this
there.
episode,
There
but that
is.
one wasn't intended.
That was excellent, though. Yeah, the accidental ones are always the best.
Cool.
Well,
Well, not when it comes to kids, but anyway, moving swiftly on.
not when it comes to kids at the in-laws' house or out in public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a joke of two kids arguing with each other about who mom loves most, and they go and ask mom, and they say, "Which one do you love most?" And she goes, "Well, one of you is an accident, and the other one's a mistake. Figure it out." I thought that was brilliant.
Oh, that's awesome.
Anyway, moving on.
To continue the Ubuntu 24 thought train, Ubuntu 24.10, codename revealed as development begins. And this is from OMG Ubuntu via Londoner. Joey Snedden writes, although Ubuntu 24.04 LTS has only just been released, the pace of development marches ever on. Ubuntu developers are already beginning to bootstrap the base on which the next short-term release of the popular Linux distribution will be built. Ubuntu 24.10 will be released in October 2024 and, upon release, receive 9 months of updates. Of course, as we all know, every new Ubuntu release gets its own alternative codename made up of an adjective and an animal, real or mythological. For Ubuntu 24.10, they've settled on oracular Oriole. Cute. But what does it mean?
Prognosticating pigeon.
There you go.
That's what it means.
Which is the one they'll probably do for the one after that. Because
Right.
that's OP.
Okay, so apparently oracular, if I'm saying that right, is an adjective relating to relating of or to an oracle. So in other words, something that has oracle-like abilities, and the oriole is apparently some kind of bird. In context,
Like I said, prognosticating pigeon.
I do like that though. At least it's pronounceable.
I mean, I think you should patent that quickly.
Okay, Baltimore Orioles. It's the same thing.
There's me not paying attention to sports as usual.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's they're going to start running out of this alliterative thing, isn't it? I mean, they've already been through the alphabet once, so I mean, I was looking at some of the older ones. Oniric Ocelot, remember that one?
Yeah, I like that one.
So yeah. I think Joey's putting a little bit too much into it, thinking it might foreshadow this or that. It's like, nah, man, it's just.
I'm not saying it's foreshadowing. I'm saying that it means the exact same thing as a prognosticating pigeon.
You're a prognosticating pigeon, huh?
I can see the future and I fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Reading on. In context, I've seen
Derailed already.
Yeah. I've seen it used. Oracular. I wonder how many times he's going to make me say that word again.
Quite a few.
Arcane sounding synonym for words like prophetic, divinatory, sibylline, augural, etc., as well as a way to infer that a statement is intentionally ambiguous or intended to be mysterious.
Well, yeah, if you can't pronounce it and you have no idea what it is, then it is going to be quite ambiguous and quite mysterious.
As for birds, orioles are known for vivid, colorful plumage that lend a dramatic presence amongst the muted, earthy tones of the trees and brushes they live in. Doesn't seem real safe, but okay. Orioles are also famed for melodious songs. And if this were the 2020s, I'd 100% make it a Twitter tweets joke. Thanks for that. In popular culture, it's New World Orioles that people generally think of and mean when talking about Orioles. The birds from this genus, related to blackbirds, which serve as inspirations for the names of famous sports teams like, there it is, Baltimore Orioles baseball team. But why oracular Oriole for Ubuntu 24.10? Perhaps oracular foreshadows the arrival of...
it's a pun.
Yeah, well done. Of innovative features and insightful solutions that will, like the Oriole, captivate and impress all those who see it. Just my interpretation, meaning Joey's, for now, and real reasoning behind the code name is a mystery. There's no reasoning. Uh, I think Shuttleworth has two hats in his office, one with adjectives and the other with names of animals, and he just,
No, they work at Ubuntu. They have a randomizer. They have a
ooh,
list and a randomizer, and they hit the button and two words pop up, and that's it.
it's probably something that just that simple. I don't know.
But yeah, I just think they're just running out of things, isn't it?
Well, you would think that, but then, projects like Debian just keep on going with Toy Story characters, and you really would think they would run out. It seems like they would run out before we run out of animals.
But then there's far
Switch
fewer.
to another
But
Pixar film.
but then there's far fewer Debian releases, isn't there?
Yeah, I suppose so.
There's been more Ubuntu releases in the last decade than there probably has been Debian releases ever, as official releases. If you
Yeah.
think about it.
Okay, I suppose I gotta keep on going here. System D version 256 introduces Run Zero, a safer alternative to sudo. And this is from Linuxiac. Ooh, I haven't heard of that one. The sudo command is widely regarded as a fundamental tool in our everyday Linux operations, so much so that we almost take its presence for granted. But what if I told you that its days might well be numbered and versions of systemd may mark the beginning of its sunset? No, I'm not rambling. Here's what it's all about. And he goes on to say, in his latest post, Leonard Pottering, the mastermind behind systemd, shares a thoughtful critique and robust replacement for the long-standing sudo command. He argues that the core issue with sudo lies in its SUID nature, which allows a process to execute with elevated privileges partially controlled by unprivileged code, demanding meticulous manual cleanup, a recipe for potential security breaches. I personally think that the biggest problem with sudo is the fact it's a SUID binary, though. The big attack surface, the plugins, network access, and so on that come after it just makes the key problem worse. In light of this, his version for a more secure system involves completely eliminating SUID binaries, pushing for an architecture where privileged code operates independently of unprivileged interface. So, in my ideal world, we'd have an OS entirely without SUID. Let's throw out the concept of SUID on the dump of Unix's bad ideas. An execution context for unprivileged, or okay, let me start over. An execution context for privileged code that is half under the control of unprivileged code and that needs careful manual cleanup is just how security engineering should be done in 2024 anymore. Enter Run Zero, systemd's latest innovation slated for release in version 256. It's not just a new tool, but a reimagined systemd run accessible via a symlink that mimics sudo without actually being an SUID binary. It operates by requesting the service manager to execute commands under the target user's UID, creating a new PTY sudo terminal. Yeah, sudo terminal, and transferring data between original TTY and this PTY. This setup ensures that the command executes in an isolated environment, freshly forked off of PID1 without inheriting any problematic context from the client. Moreover, Run Zero eschews traditional configuration complexities by utilizing Polkit for authorization, streamlining user interactions, and further securing the execution process. The tool also adds a touch of user-friendly flair. When operating with elevated privileges, it modifies the terminal background to a reddish hue, serving as a visual cue of one's elevated status, a simple yet effective reminder to manage privileges responsibly. In conclusion, one thing is certain: this will spark further debate within the Linux community. Another certainty is that systemd version 256 is now 88% complete, with little left until the final stable release, and what will happen after that remains to be seen. For detailed information, there is a link to Powdering's post in the show notes under this article. It doesn't matter because they're just gonna do a shell alias to sudo, so nobody's gonna notice. Honestly, that's what the distributions will do to handle that.
If they don't, I will.
Yeah, because that is muscle
I
memory.
mean, how long did it take me to stop using apt-get?
Yeah. And honestly, you could still use apt-get if you wanted to, but I mean,
Yeah, I'm still using apt-get.
There goes your camera again.
Let's fix Majid's camera again. Let me go down here. Oh boy.
Don't you just love Arch?
Yeah.
Oh, you're running Arch?
Yeah, Majid's running Arch, everybody.
Yeah, I was bullied into it. Peer pressure. You guys.
I didn't bully you into it.
I didn't tell you to use it to make the show with. I wouldn't even do that.
All right. You know, obviously, you don't put your money where your mouth is, isn't it?
No, I don't. Not that money and not that mouth.
Okay.
Oh, you're up next, Joe.
I want to make a lot lizard comment.
Do it.
RISC-V support in Android just got a big setback. This is from Android Authority. Back in early 2023, Google announced that it was working on enabling support for the RISC-V architecture in Android. RISC-V is an open instruction set architecture that's grown in popularity in recent years since hardware makers don't need to pay a licensing fee to build RISC-V chips. Some Android devices already ship with chipsets based on the RISC-V. Though these chipsets typically run something other than Android and act as a coprocessor to the device's main, typically ARM-based processor. Late last year, chipmaker Qualcomm announced that it was designing a wearable chipset based on RISC-V and that this chipset would run on Google's Android-based Wear OS platform. Once released, these Wear OS smartwatches would be the first commercial RISC-V hardware to run a Google-certified Android build. To make that happen, though, Google must devote a lot of engineering resources to make Android and its underlying Linux kernel fork boot on RISC-V hardware. Google has already done much of the work to enable RISC-V support in Android, though there's quite a bit of work still ahead. Google continues to work on RISC-V with several patches being submitted in the last few days and weeks. Although Google has shown significant progress in recent weeks in improving RISC-V support in Android, it seems that we're still quite a bit away from seeing RISC-V hardware running certified builds of Android. Earlier today, a senior staff software engineer at Google, who, according to their LinkedIn, leads the Android systems team and works on Android's Linux kernel fork, submitted a series of patches to the AOSP that remove ACK's support for RISC-V 64. The description of these patches states that support for RISC-64 GKI kernels is discontinued. ACK stands for Android Common Kernel and refers to the downstream branches of the official kernel.org Linux kernel that Google maintains. The ACK is basically Linux plus some patches of interest to the Android community that haven't been merged into mainline or long-term supported LTS kernels. There are multiple ACK branches, including Android Machine, which is the primary development branch that is forked into GKI kernel branches that correspond to a particular combination of supported Linux kernel and Android OS version. GKI stands for Generic Kernel Image and refers to a kernel that's built from one of these branches. Every certified Android device ships with a kernel based on one of these GKI branches. As Google currently does not certify Android devices that ship with a mainline Linux kernel build. Since these patches remove RISC-V kernel support, RISC-V kernel build support, and RISC-V emulator support, any companies looking to compile a RISC-V build of Android right now would need to create and maintain their own fork of Linux with the requisite ACK and RISC-V patches. Given that Google currently only certifies Android builds that ship with the GKI kernel built from an ACK branch, that means we likely won't see certified builds of Android on RISC-V hardware anytime soon. Our initial interpretation of these patches was that Google was preparing to kill off RISC-V support in Android, since that was the most obvious conclusion. However, a spokesperson for Google told us this: Android will continue to support RISC-V due to the rapid rate of iteration. We are not ready to provide a single supported image for all vendors. This particular series of patches removes RISC-V support from the Android generic kernel image. While the company's statement doesn't go into detail about the rationale behind this decision, it's good to get confirmation that RISC-V support in Android isn't being killed off entirely. Still, the statement alludes to the fact that there's still a ton of work that needs to be done before Android is ready for RISC-V. Even once it's ready, Google will need to redo the work to add RISC-V support in the kernel anyway. At the very least, Google's decision likely means that we might need to wait even longer than expected to see commercial Android devices running on a RISC-V chip.
I can't see RISC-V becoming mainstream for when it comes to mobile devices. And I think Google sees that as well, and so is kind of slowly stepping back. I don't know the technical reasons, whether or the merits or demerits of that approach, but I think that's what, as a company, they've decided that yeah, this ain't going anywhere, so let's just slowly move back.
I just need it to happen for my end of the year predictions.
Priorities, eh, Bill?
If they,
Priorities.
yeah, I mean, if they want to screw it up after that, that's on them. But yeah,
No, I
I,
would like to see a commercial device hit the market that has RISC-V Android on it.
From your perspective, what would you think that it would give you that you're not getting at the moment?
Nothing. But it would help Google in the fact that they don't have to pay any type of licensing fee.
my fear is that
Granted,
it would have the same. You've got the RISC-V chip and you got the open instruction set, but then to make it into something usable in a consumer product, the GPU and then the other bits on top, and none of that's going to be open. So we're really not going to be a lot better off than we are with ARM.
yeah,
And I
So it's
mean,
the same. It would be the same situation, basically.
yeah, basically.
more or
Uh,
less.
and it just, I don't know. I don't have any devices with it on it. I don't know if there is any real benefit to it above ARM, because ARM seems to be really going from strength to strength these days with the devices you see
Yeah, I
coming.
mean, with the M series in Apple, and now we're going to be getting the Snapdragon X Elite Windows on ARM. Um, yeah, I just can't see this happening.
It'd be, as time goes on, it'll be harder and harder for a new guy to break through all the barriers to get into that ecosystem. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
You
if you
know,
just look, I mean, you just look at mobile operating systems in general. I mean, I know it's slightly different, but 10, 15 years ago at the beginning, you had all these players, and now everything runs on ARM.
yeah,
Everything's got very similar, instruction sets. There's basically only two operating systems. Um, Maybe there might be a third with Windows on ARM, but that's really about it. So, as time goes on, you get fewer and fewer options. At the beginning of a technology, there's always a burst because nobody knows what's going to work or what's going to become successful. But when people do, people follow the money. Companies follow the money. I mean, it's what companies do, isn't it?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
having said that, there is
Uh,
some good RISC-V news. Hey, Bill.
well, let's see. Okay, so RISC-V OS version 5.3 arrives with Raspberry Pi Wi-Fi support. Okay, let's read on. And this is from the Register. RISC OS 5.3 is the latest release of Acorn's original native operating system for its ARM processors. original but not first, as Acorn Soft's project lead Paul Fellows told the Reg in 2022 what was then called Arthur supplanted a far more ambitious project called ARX, which never shipped. Uh, ROS 5.3 is the first stable release from the Risk OS Open, aka Rule, project since version 5.28 in 2020. If you have that, you can upgrade in place. RISC-OS Open Project leader Steve Revell, I apologize, who the Register interviewed last year, said, and I quote, "This stable release has been in the works for a long time. We wanted to get it right. The Wi-Fi support comes from a successful combination of partnerships with companies in the RISC-OS scene and generous donations from community members to support our bounties. We really hope the welcome addition of Wi-Fi on the Pi makes it easier for people who never tried this little OS to give it a spin. Acorn's original and very expensive documentation has been updated for this release too." And it goes on to say there's also a complete user guide PDF included in our RISC OS Pi download, a 618 page book also available in print from Rule or Amazon. We take pride in the quality of our user documentation and believe this sets us apart from many open source projects. New owners, RISC OS Developments makes RISC OS 5 open source in 2018, and it's still in active development under RISC OS Open. That is no trivial project, although by modern standards, this desktop operating system is tiny. Significant chunks of it were hand-coded in ARM assembly code for the 20th century hardware version 5.30, supports 7 platforms. Post 1994 Acorn machines with the IOMD chipset, the Ionics and BeagleBoard hardwares were described in 2010, and LSR's Titanium PC plus 3 ARM development boards, the IGEP version 5, the LSR's Titanium PC plus 3 ARM development boards, the IGEP version 5, the OMAP 5432, and the Panda board, and of course the Raspberry Pi, which is by some distance the cheapest member of the family. For now, RISC OS does not support the Raspberry Pi 5, but it does run on the Pi 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's fast and responsive on all of them. Ooh, this is long. We found the new support for the Wi-Fi controllers on the Raspberry Pi 3 and 4 a little clunky. For instance, changes to the network configuration require a reboot. Even so, it's a lot better than nothing. First, you can enable the SDIO WLAN interface. Then, after a restart, a new Wi-Fi icon appears on the left of the icon bar, which allows you to connect to both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz networks. This is a fairly modernized and refurbished late 1980s single-user GUI-based OS that implies some limitations. It was first released the same year as OS 2 1.0, long before Apple System 7 or Windows 3.0. In fact, it'll remind you of Windows 3 on MS-DOS. It's a single tasking text mode OS with networking on top of which is a graphical desktop that does cooperative multitasking. RISC OS gives applications access to much of the memory map, and so if a program accidentally scribbles over the wrong parts of that address space, the whole computer can freeze up, which in testing on our Pi 400 did several times. But saying that, it's an admirably complete OS with quite a rich portfolio of applications. RISC OS 5.3 comes with a selection of productivity apps, plus development tools, including a choice of editors, Python, Lua, and C compiler, and of course with a 32-bit version of BBC Basic 5. a fully structured interpreter which also supports inline ARM assembly language. This is, in a way, a mature OS with an ecosystem and an aftermarket, which we feel we must explicitly spell out means that quite a few things, quite a few of those third-party applications and drivers will cost you money. There are emulators that will let you run 20th century Acorn apps that you can find online, but this isn't an emulated vintage environment like Amiga Forever. It's not meant for running games from 30 years ago. This is a native bare metal OS built on 1980s roots, but updated for the 21st century hardware. It's also not an experimental project with little practical use. Like Redux OS or Serenity OS, interesting though they are, little practical use. The RISC OS GUI, called simply the WIMP, will take some getting used to. It has no application bars at all. For example, you middle click on things to get at the relevant menu. This GUI only has context menus, nothing else. What menu is easier to hit than whacking the mouse pointer up at the top of the screen? One where you don't move the mouse at all. The menu is always where your mouse already is. And yes, there's an icon bar along the bottom where you can bring up menus and windows for running programs and other things. But when you want to do something in an app, you click the menu mouse button in the context of the application rather than looking at the menu bar. The idea of having a directory navigation right in the save dialog so you can choose where to put the file was a hack invented for the original 128 kilobyte Macintosh because it didn't have enough RAM to show a filter window alongside your app. RISC OS didn't need that. In 1987, it ran on a 32-bit RISC workstation with a meg of RAM. That's 1 megabyte. So its save dialog just had an icon that you drag to the directory window you want. Similarly, this is the OS whose original GUI some like to think may have inspired NextStep's dock, which in turn inspired the Windows 95 taskbar. RISC OS doesn't work like them because it's often thought they get their ideas from RISC OS. When you run a RISC OS application, all that happens is that it puts an icon in the icon bar, middle click on the new icon for global options, or in most apps, it just left click in the open a new window. I think anybody wants to read any more on this can go to the show notes. It kind of just goes on and on and on. We should have
Yeah,
paraphrased.
it's it's a really long article, isn't it? Really, to be honest.
And it's getting my brain tied in knots.
Yeah.
It's all really interesting, and you know that whole thing of just clicking anywhere to get an application menu, that's actually a feature in XFCE that you can turn on, where if you don't,
And Bodhi, I think, as well.
yeah,
Wow. Somebody apart from Moss mentions Bodhi. Shit, it's
yeah,
me.
that's just proof that we're never going to get away from it. But no, you're right. You know, if it wasn't a good idea, then you wouldn't see it in other places like that. So, I mean, you don't get the whisker menu in XFCE, but you do get the old-fashioned applications menu by just right-clicking on the desktop. Which, you know,
Yeah.
if you was trying to build something really, really lightweight, like for example, one of my laptops I take on the road with me runs XFCE, and I did everything I could to lighten that up. And one of the things was to get rid of the menu and just, if I needed a menu, right click on the desktop and bring it up that way. But other than that, I can XFCE.
I have a feeling that the Amiga OS Workbench had that as well. This is going into the mists of time now, but yeah.
Well,
So it's obviously something that's it's a well known paradigm.
Yeah, it is, and OpenBox uses it.
Hmm.
That's the way you would get to them back in the Crunch Bang days. That's how you would get a menu. So yeah, that's been a useful. I have not looked at Risk OS on anything really, and the way it's described here is kind of
It's
a
described as a hobbyist thing, not with
yeah.
any kind, which is fine because that's kind of what we are. But it doesn't seem to have any specific practical purpose, really. Which
Yeah.
again, doesn't things don't have to be, you know.
Right on.
Okay, then. Bitwarden launches new multi-factor authentication authenticator app for iOS and Android. So this is from Bleeping Computer. Bitwarden has just launched a new multi-factor authenticator app called, guess what? Bitwarden Authenticator. It's available for iOS and Android. The app uses time-based one-time passwords or OTPs for accounts registered by scanning a QR code to provide users with extra layer of security during authentication. By leveraging widely adopted standards such as TOTP, Bitwarden can work seamlessly everywhere, including legacy applications, reads the launch announcement. Enterprises can remain nimble. You know, I only ever see that word nimble when referring to things like this. Nobody uses it in the real world. Anyway, enterprises can remain nimble without having to re-architect current systems while
That and
adopting
Vanilla Ice songs,
Ice
quick
Baby.
and nimble.
While adopting strong passwordless options such as passkeys, FIDO2 hardware keys, magic links, biometrics, and beyond. Although TOTP authentication was already available in the Bitwarden Password Manager, it was a premium feature only available to paying users. Now I'm sure I've got it and I'm not a paying user. Okay, anyway, I'll have to look at it again. In contrast, the Bitwarden Authenticator app is available for free to all users, even those without a Bitwarden account, and can be used as a standalone app. Bitwarden CTO Kyle Spearin said the launch of the new app provides immediate value to Bitwarden's user base who have been asking for a standalone app for several years and promise new features and enhancements in future releases. Bitwarden Authenticator is considered a stable release at this point, but it lacks advanced features commonly found in other products in this space. Currently, it generates TOTPs for online services that support MFA apps, including Bitwarden Password Manager, while backups are handled by the OS's backup services. The app settings are also give users the capability to add biometrics as an additional security step, while exporting is also available. The published roadmap for future releases includes an import function, push-based 2FA, account recovery, Bitwarden account and vault syncing, and workforce enterprise-grade authentication options. Although the lack of some of the mentioned features may make adopting or migrating TOTP authentication to the new tool challenging for some users, shouldn't be a big hurdle for most. It's available on Google Play for Android phones and on the Apple App Store for iPhones and iOS devices in general. Being an open source project, the code for the two apps is available on the public GitHub repositories. Those interested in looking at the code can find it. And there's links to that in the show notes and in the article. So I'm a user of Bitwarden. It's my password manager of choice. I think it works really well. I always found having to use authenticator apps from Google or Microsoft a little bit odd and not particularly actually that user friendly actually. And so this is something I may well be trying. I suppose it depends also what other services will allow it being used for MFA. So yeah, it's good, and it's good. It's nice to see a open source project doing well, and being used more widely. I was a little bit surprised about the saying that the the OTP things were a paid thing, because I said I'm sure I've got that on my
Well,
password.
then they immediately said that that free users can have it too.
Okay. So yeah, do you guys use Bitwarden,
No,
or what do you use for
Yes,
passwords?
yes, I do.
Do you use anything for passwords, Joe?
sure do.
Okay, fine, fair enough. Let's let's move on.
That's all you're gonna get out of him.
Yeah, it's an Excel spreadsheet, isn't it? It's an
Yeah,
Excel
it's a
on your
course
home
it is.
screen.
.txt file.
Of course it is.
I had a colleague at work complaining about his computer being slow or whatever, and he gave it to me. Can you fix it? And you're a technical person, aren't you? And so I opened it up. I logged in to find an Excel file with all his passwords and everything. on the front page, on his, home screen. And I was just like, boss, it's a good thing you gave this to me. If you'd given it to anybody else, you would now be very, very poor. But anyway.
You'd be paying a ransom right now. No, Bitwarden is fantastic. I've been using it. Man, I think I've been using it for 3 or 4 years now. They've got excellent. I mean, there's a native app for everything,
Yeah.
and there is a browser plugin for
Yes, yes, yeah.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very true.
and
Firefox and all the Chromium based ones. Yeah, it's a good thing. I do sometimes get a bit lazy because I do have some passwords saved on my Firefox, and I think to myself, should I keep them there? Should I delete them all and just stick with Bitwarden? But
Does Bitwarden have a built-in password generator?
yes,
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and it does it's got the filling it out for you technology or
yeah,
functionality as well too. Like
yeah,
things I used to use a thing called KeyPass, and there's a few iterations of that called
yeah,
One
KeyPass.
pass.
yeah,
Yeah, KeyPass XC, and the way I was handling that between devices was through a combination of rsync and stuff like that, or just putting it in the next cloud as a file, and that works too. But with Bitwarden, I've been paying for the service for a few years, and it's there. I don't have to worry about keeping it up to date because whatever they're doing is keeping it far more secure than anything I would ever do with my passwords. And I mean, honestly, I like that peace of mind, and it's a great project. It's a great open source project, one of those darling projects we've got in this
yeah.
space. So
Well,
kudos.
speaking with since we're talking about security and privacy,
Yeah. Uh, so in security and privacy, cybersecurity researchers spotlight a new ransomware threat. Be careful where you upload files. And this is from the conversion. Oh, no, the conversation. I'm sorry. You probably know better than to click on links that download unknown files onto your computer. More on that later. It turns out that uploading files can get you into trouble too. Today's web browsers are much more powerful than earlier generations of browsers. They're able to manipulate data within both the browsers and the computer's local file system. Users can send and receive email, listen to music, or watch a movie within a browser with the click of a button. Unfortunately, these capabilities also mean that hackers can find clever ways to abuse the browsers to trick you into letting ransomware lock up your files when you think that you're simply doing your usual tasks online. The threat applies to Google's Chrome and Microsoft's Edge browsers, but not Apple Safari or Mozilla's Firefox. Let's get a big round of applause there. Chrome accounts for 65% of browsers used, and Edge accounts for 5%. To the best of my knowledge, there have been no reports of hackers using the method so far. Several security researchers have communicated with the developers responsible for the File System Access API, and they have expressed support for our work and interest in our approaches to defending against this kind of attack. We also filed a security report to Microsoft, but have not heard from them. Today's browsers are almost operating systems unto themselves. They can run software programs and encrypt files. These capabilities, combined with the browser's access to the host computer's files, including ones in the cloud, shared folders, and external drives via the File System Access API, creates a new opportunity for ransomware. Imagine you want to edit photos on a benign looking free online photo editing tool. When you upload the photos for editing, any hackers who control the malicious editing tool can access the files on your computer via your browser. The hackers would gain access to the folder you are uploading from and all subfolders. Then the hackers would encrypt the files in your file system and demand a ransom payment to decrypt them. Today's web browsers are more powerful and in some ways more vulnerable than their predecessors. Ransomware is a growing problem. Attacks have hit individuals as well as organizations, including Fortune 500 companies, banks, cloud service providers, cruise operators, threat monitoring services, chip manufacturing, governments, medical centers and hospitals, insurance companies, schools, university, and even police departments. In 2023, organizations paid more than 1.1 billion US dollars in ransomware payments to attackers, and 19 ransomware attacks targeted organizations every second. It is no wonder ransomware is the number one arms race today between the hackers and the security specialists. Traditional ransomware runs on your computer after hackers have tricked you into downloading it. A team of researchers led by Selkuk Aluignak at the Cyber Physical Systems Security Lab in Florida International University, including postdoctoral researcher Abbas Akar, PhD, and PhD candidate Harun Oz, in collaboration with Google senior research scientist
Guliz
Guliz.
Sare Tunke.
Let's hope that doesn't happen again. Have been investigating this new type of potential ransomware for the past 2 years. Specifically, we have been exploring how powerful modern web browsers have become and how they can be weaponized by hackers to create novel forms of ransomware. In our paper, ROB, or whatever that letter is, ransomware over modern web browsers, such as which was presented at the Usenix Security Symposium in August 2023, we showed how this emergency ransomware strain is easy to design and how damaging it can be. In particular, we designed and implemented the first browser-based ransomware called ROB and analyzed it with browsers running on 3 different major operating systems: Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, 5 cloud providers, and 5 antivirus products. Our evaluation showed that ROB is capable of encrypting numerous types of files. Because ROB runs within the browsers, there are no malicious payloads for a traditional antivirus program to catch. This means existing ransomware detection systems face several issues against this powerful browser-based ransomware. They propose 3 different defense approaches to mitigate this new ransomware type. These approaches operate at different levels: browser, file system, and user, and complement one another. The first approach temporarily halts the web application, a program that runs in the browser, in order to detect encrypted user files. The second approach monitors the activity of the web application on the user's computer to identify ransomware-like patterns. The third approach introduces a new permission dialog to inform users about the risks and implications associated with allowing web applications to access their computer's file system. When it comes to protecting your computer, be careful about where you upload as well as download your files. Your uploads could be giving hackers an in to your computer. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in our innards. But yes, I've thought about this for years when I upload or when I use any cloud service that you are really providing one more attack surface because of the APIs, because of all the things that have been put in place to make things easier for people to move data back and forth. It gives attackers one more way to get at you. So
There's always a trade-off between security and convenience.
Oh yeah.
It's a well-established topic. And I was just really surprised in this article at the number of tongue twisters that they lumped together all at once. I was kind of surprised that, Yeah,
Obviously, it was obviously an article made for Bill.
Yeah,
exactly.
lovely. My problem is that the way it's written, the way we lay out our notes, my eyes start to see just big black blocks in the middle of the screen. That's why I always put a little space in between in the lines, but it infuriates Moss. So I stopped doing it.
Okay. GitLab flaw allowing account hijacking under active exploitation. This is from Ars Technica. A maximum severity vulnerability that allows hijackers to hijack GitLab accounts with no user interaction required is now under active exploitation. Federal government officials warned as data showed that thousands of users had yet to install a patch released in January. Patch your crap, people. January. A change GitLab implemented in May 2023 made it possible for users to initiate password changes through links sent to secondary email addresses. The move was designed to permit resets when users didn't have access to the email address used to establish the account. In January, GitLab disclosed that the feature allowed attackers to send reset emails to accounts they controlled, and from there, click on the embedded link and take over the account. While exploits require no user interaction, hijackings work only against accounts that aren't configured to use multi-factor authentication. Even with MFA, accounts remained vulnerable to password resets, but the attackers ultimately are unable to access the account, allowing the rightful owner to change the reset password. The vulnerability, tracked as CVE 2023-7028, carries a severity rating of 10 out of 10. On Wednesday, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency said it is aware of evidence of active exploitation and added the vulnerability to its list of known exploited vulnerabilities. CISA provided no details about the in-the-wild attacks. A GitLab representative declined to provide specifics about the active exploitation of the vulnerability. The vulnerability, classified as an improper access control flaw, could pose a grave threat. GitLab software typically has access to multiple development environments belonging to users. With the ability to access them and surreptitiously introduce changes, attackers could sabotage projects or plant backdoors that could infect anyone using software built in the compromised environment. An example of a similar supply chain attack is the one that hit SolarWinds in 2020 and pushed malware to more than 18,000 of its customers, 100 of whom received follow-on hacks. Other recent examples of supply chain attacks are linked somewhere. These sorts of attacks are powerful. By hacking a single carefully selected target, attackers gain the means to infect thousands of downstream users, often without requiring them to take any action at all. According to the internet scans performed by security organization Shadow Server, more than 2,100 IP addresses showed they were hosting one or more vulnerable GitLab instances. So
You
yeah,
know,
those would be linked in the original article, and surreptitiously. Just saying.
that's a fun word to say. Um, this is
Surreptitiously.
this is a problem you will run into when you install software directly from GitHub or GitLab or whatever, because you do not have you're installing something that's not available in your repo, or it's not up to date in your repo enough to do the thing you're wanting to do, and you go out and you find it on GitLab or GitHub, so you install it from scratch, and then you just never pay attention to the update cycle of it, because we're so used to. I mean, that's one of the downsides of having a package manager, and we've gotten used to that paradigm of the package manager handling all of our updates. We lose the ability to start thinking about the software that's not updated that way.
So, I mean,
But the long and short of this article is patch your crap.
Yeah, it.
no,
Pay
definitely. But
attention to what
just
you've
to,
got installed from third parties. I'm sorry. Go
yeah, I was
ahead.
just going to say, just going to that point, if you, one of the advantages that Linux is supposed to have, as compared to, say, Windows, is the kind of more centralized package system. In Windows, I know that Microsoft tried to get the Microsoft Store, but I mean, who the hell uses that? I doubt even they use it. And most people are used to just going on to whatever website, downloading a .exe, and then going on from there. And so, since it's one of the advantages that we have over in the Linux space, I think it's something that we should always tell people that, look, if you're going to install stuff from the command line. That's going to be coming from your repos. install it from an app center or a FlatHub store or whatever. I've always thought that GitHub and all that, have you ever tried installing stuff from there? It's not easy,
Well, I'm gonna
you
be
know.
yeah,
I have
I'm gonna be talking about
all
that
the
here in a
time.
little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. I mean, so it's almost like it's designed not to be used regularly. It's there as a thing for showing the code being open and stuff like that. It shouldn't be the place where you should be getting your software routinely, because this is the exact issue. It's not getting updated, and unless your eyes on the ball, and let's be honest,
Yeah.
there's enough crap going on in everybody's lives here. Keeping a packet, on track of some random software package you've got on your computer is not going to be high on your list of priorities, is it?
You mean to tell me you're not checking your email every day for GitHub notifications on projects that you're
Yes,
using?
well, no, I am not doing that. I am sorry, I'm not a good enough geek, but
But I mean that's how
You're
you've
not a
got to.
geeky enough geek.
yeah, I'm not geeky enough.
Yeah, in a world
Y-
of geeks, we're not geeky enough, I
In a
suppose.
world of geeks, he wasn't
That's
geeky
right.
enough.
One man holds the key.
Okay, okay, all right. Let's move on to our bi-weekly wanderings. Bill.
Well, right. Yeah, I mean to continue to sort of continue on that whole
To
conversation.
continue with what we were talking about.
Okay, so these last couple of weeks, I've worked on a couple of projects. The first was to take advantage of the work that has been done in the open source community to bring first class support to Linux for the Focusrite brand of audio interfaces. For anyone who doesn't know, Focusrite is probably one of the best and arguably the most prolific makers of audio interface equipment out there. A couple of us on the show, for example, use their audio interfaces in creation of the shows we're a part of. They make a line of products called the Scarlett. There are several iterations of the devices depending on your needs. An audio interface, I guess I should say, is a device that kind of sits between your input, which in this case is the microphone I'm talking on, and the computer. It provides the preamp functionality as well as handling other aspects of the audio going in and out of the computer. The operating system literally recognizes it as a separate sound card type device to simplify it further, perhaps overly so. These devices are USB class compliant, which for the most part means you can simply plug them in and they will work without any need for additional software. And that's true. If your needs are simple, you'll not have to fool around with much at all. The problem, however, is that Focusrite hides away some of the functionality in a software layer on the device, and it does need not frequent but periodic updates to the internal firmware that can't be done, or we weren't able to do it on Linux until very recently. Um, and it comes as no surprise. Focusrite only distributes the software for Windows and Mac, and it's proprietary little pieces of software. It is what it is. Fortunately, an open source project, which I linked to in the notes, sprung up some time ago by Jeffrey Bennett and others to bring first class support of these devices to Linux. The whole thing depends on two pieces of software, uh, an ALSA driver for the devices, which as of kernel 6.7 is part of the tree by default, and the ALSA Scarlett GUI, which is the user space tool for initializing, meaning when you first buy the device and you hook it up, it needs to do a couple of things, and configuring the devices. Unfortunately, Mint 21.3 only offers kernel version 6.5 as the highest available, so the kernel module and firmware has to be installed separately, and functionality is a bit less than it would be with a more recent kernel. Fortunately, there are .debs for the low-level stuff as well as the ALSA Scarlett GUI. Oh, and a Flatpak for the GUI application as well. I haven't tried that yet, though, because the downloaded and installed just fine. I got it all up and running, and I am happy with the results. Okay, so to be clear, you don't have to have this stuff to make the devices work. However, now with the driver, also Mixer, for example, is able to control all the individual confusing input and output streams the device is capable of handling. It is also capable of keeping the internal firmware that I was talking about up to date, which is probably the most important part. Um, in the most, uh, okay, before I move on, when you first buy one of these things and you hook it up, it's got a little bit of mass storage functionality where it's got the binaries to install on Windows and Mac to get the GUI tool up and running, and then it runs the first firmware update, and then you can actually set the sample rate and all that stuff right there from that GUI. You don't have any of that on Linux until now. And now, when I actually bought 2 new devices over the last week, and both of those hooked up and was recognized by the new software just fine. And yeah, I don't know that it's going to give me any better quality, but it is going to at least keep the firmware up to date and all that stuff. I just like the fact that it works on Linux, and somebody, it was important enough to somebody to go through the trouble of reverse engineering all that. I linked to a couple of really cool blog articles about it. And like we were talking about before, these things are not in the default repos, especially when you're building for backported kernels. You've got to get the software from GitHub and install it. They've got a dev file. They've even got the Flatpak right there on the GitHub page. But to keep these things up to date, you've got to be watching that GitHub page and update the next version of that software yourself. And that's it doesn't take a whole lot to see the vulnerability that puts on you as a user. So, this is one of those times where when you go outside of the normal use cases and you start looking for software that's not available in the repos yet, in this case, which I think, like I said, as a kernel version 6.7, the only thing I'm going to need to install is the GUI tool, and that is available as a Flatpak. So we will see how that goes after. I'm assuming the next version of Mint will have either 6.7 or 6.8 in it, I hope. But we'll see how that goes. I'll probably talk a little bit more about it in the future. Okay, so in the most recent episode of Linux OTC, Majid described his woes with installing Endeavour OS on a machine with the goal of dual booting it with Windows. He was not successful until he decided to nuke and pave the whole system, making Endeavour the only OS on the machine, which, yeah, that was successful. I've seen this problem before, so I thought I'd try to replicate it and see if there's like a standard way we could come up with to let people know how to work through it. So I did, and I've replicated it several times by now, and I've kind of worked out a formula for it. So in the next couple weeks, I'm going to make a video where I'm going to walk through the process and show people. And a lot of this is going to be really useful for anybody that wants to dual boot Linux alongside Windows. A lot of it has to do, in the case of Endeavour, because Endeavour is really just Arch on easy mode, sort of. It's probably, outside of going with something
It doesn't feel very easy from where I'm starting.
well, I mean, it's Arch on easy mode. So, I mean, Arch is one of those things that I would not.
Manjaro is Arch on easy mode.
Yeah, but even that's been, I mean, they've deviated quite a bit into their own thing. There's very little outside of the repos and the ability to use the AUR. I mean, that, to be fair. But in the case of Endeavour, that is just vanilla Arch with some tools to make the whole onboarding process a little easier, um, a little less command line-ish, I guess. But you've still got some of the pitfalls as you normally would with a regular installation of Arch. Um, Traditionally, anybody that installs Arch, you just go and turn off Secure Boot. You just do it. You just turn it off because there's ways of getting it to work with Arch, but they're not very beginner friendly, and I've never actually got it to work. So turn off Secure Boot. The second, once you've got Windows installed, or if you have had Windows installed for some time, use the Windows partition tool. And in the video, I'm going to go through all this. Um, Use the Windows partition tool to resize the Windows partition. Anytime you're going to manipulate Windows at all, use Windows tools to do it. Um, it only takes a few seconds, especially on an SSD, to resize. Um, and then when you're installing Endeavor, first off, it's going to give you the choice between either using systemd boot or grub or no bootloader at all. And some people will do that if they're going to use like a EFI stub or something like that. But most people need either systemd boot or grub. Choose grub. Grub speaks dual boot a little better than systemd boot does. And then you're going to need to do manual partitioning, which is a little frightening for some people, but I'm going to go through all this too. The free space that you created when you shortened the partition, the large Windows partition, you're going to flag that as root and mount it to /nothing to the root directory. Then after that, you're going to find that little 100 megabyte Windows partition that is formatted in FAT32. That is where the EFI stuff is stored. You're going to put the boot flag on that, and then you're going to mount that to /boot/ESP. Don't mount it to /boot because it's not big enough for the startup, the volume Linux startup volume, the init image and the kernel. It's not big enough for that. So mount it to /boot/ESP. And as I said, use grub as the boot manager. You follow those steps, you'll have a working dual booted. And well, there is one more thing too. Sometimes the way EFI works is it recognizes the Windows boot manager as its own boot environment, and then the grub installation as another boot environment. And sometimes it will not choose the grub as the default boot environment. So you do all this work and it says it's installed, and then you go to reboot and it'll go right back into Windows again. Well, that's because the BIOS or the UEFI is not telling the machine to boot from grub. So you got to go into your UEFI and change the boot setting to look at that particular UEFI and boot from that. And then I've linked here, the Arch Wiki also outlines some necessary steps to take once both operating systems are installed to make the whole thing work well. One very important thing that anybody needs to do once they've started dual booting is to set Windows to use UTC instead of local time, which it does by default, because every time you go from one operating system to the other, and then you've got that layer of UEFI or BIOS, as you could probably call it, I suppose, it's going to update the system clock based on the information from the last operating system that it ran. So the goal here is to make sure both operating systems are sending the same data to the UEFI as it shuts down. And it's really done with a one-liner command to the Windows registry, and then you'll never have a problem with time. Because I'll tell you right now, when time gets screwed up on any system, you start running into all kinds of problems, especially when the system is reporting that it's exists in the past or something like that. I'll let everybody know when I get that video done and where to watch it. I'll probably put it up on Linux OTC YouTube page, but I don't know. Maybe I'll put it up on here as well, because I don't know that there's that many people doing dual booting anymore, and I wonder if the reason is because it's gotten kind of difficult to do because of the
It's
UEFI.
always been difficult to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
It's always been a pain.
as long as UEFI's been around, it's been even worse.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Windows has always had this random overwrite the boot so that it only boots to Windows thing going on.
and really, it requires you to go back into your UEFI, and in fact, what I would do is I would go into the UEFI and tell it to give you there's this setting called the post delay, and you can set that to like 5 seconds. That way, if you need to hit the escape button or the F12 to get into that to change it, you don't have to like get into Windows and then do that whole arcane process of booting into the UEFI and all that. You can just do it right there at startup and then fix the problem. Because a lot of times it doesn't overwrite; it just sets the UEFI to ignore the grub EFI setting, or the UEFI is just programmed to go by whatever is the newest thing on there, and it just needs to be set back, and then it works again. Dual booting is a world of, I don't know, responsive behavior to things that change. If you have to use it, then you have to understand some of these things to move forward. I kind of gave up on it as a rule some time back. This machine, in fact, when I bought it, I had a Windows partition on it, and it just wasn't. It was just taking up space, and you would have these problems like Joe described, and it just wasn't worth it anymore. So, if you've got the need, though, I suppose it's still worth learning how to do it properly. But yeah, I'll let everybody know when I get that up and running. But that's about all I got. How about you, Joe?
Well, my 3D printer was acting up again. My print quality was starting to just go down. Some parts on the print bed were just too high up, and some parts were too low down. And there were a lot of places where the print wasn't aligned. It did not matter what I was printing, and I went through the whole checking of the belts, making sure the bed's not warped, etc., etc. Nothing seemed to improve the issue. I was even about to try and redo all of my settings in Cura, thinking that might be causing it. Then, during one of my prints, I finally saw something since I was sitting at just the right angle to see it. The entire hot end beneath my cooler was shifting back and forth. I did let that print finish, but then I took off the Fang fan assembly and checked, and that whole part that heats up and extrudes was extremely loose. And attempting to tighten the bolts that holds it, it would not get tight. Turns out one of the bolts was stripped. Thankfully, I do keep bolts of the correct size sitting around for various other projects. That and a washer should hold until I find replacements. And then, looking at the other bolt that's there holding it onto the back plane, it seems that the head is stripped. And it's going to be very fun when it comes time to remove it and replace it. Maybe when it comes time, I'll just get the whole back plate assembly and hot end assembly and get it all ready to go at the same time. Um, Now, the fix itself greatly improved my prints, and I should be able to add speed back to the prints again and get things going much quicker. That being said, while I did print a couple of other things, most of what I have been printing is for a new project that I have started. Jackie was able to get a DVD duplicator with 8 DVD trays and a control tray in it for absolutely free. No, I don't want to replicate DVDs, but I do want to make a direct attached storage, or a DAS. I think this is the lowest cost option, especially since I got the case and power supply for free. Looking at the available options on how to set it up, I think that the lowest cost will be for me to get a SAS PCIe card from eBay for about $15, and then 2 6-foot long SAS to SATA 4-way splitter cables that are about $20 each. Um, The hard drives that I want will then be the largest expense, and I'll have to purchase them over a long time. In the meantime, for testing purposes and to get the thing up and running, I've grabbed a couple of my own drives, and I got sent a few from Bill, and Moss was talking about maybe sending me a couple, and I will use them and replace them when I can. I'm also 3D printing 8 drive tray adapters that will work with the 5.25-inch bays and convert them to either 3.5 or 2.5-inch drives and a set of 9 drive bay covers. Now, the drive bay covers are in white, which I think makes a great contrast to the black case. But this brings my total cost to less than $60 after the parts and plastic. I could probably calculate the cost of the plastic to get an exact price, but I really don't want to. It's not much. I also got my credit card number stolen and my debit card number. Now, evidently, the debit card was skimmed somewhere and someone used it to buy sporting goods in multiple states across the U.S. on Sunday night. I understand that it's a common way to do it in the past when banks were not open on a Sunday and there was little you could do until the following day. But my bank was able to catch it fairly quickly, and there was only about $300 removed from the account, which still sucks. There were other attempts, but I was able to lock my card, and the bank quickly canceled it after a simple phone call. It should take like 10 days or so, but I should get the money back. I mean, unless I started teleporting, it obviously wasn't me. I guess it could have been online orders, but even still, I mean, really random places, and it's all sporting goods. I actually received one of the things in the mail, and it was a $30 hat. So I don't know. I had to double check with my kids to make sure that they weren't accidentally ordering things on one of my computers. And no. This also, having to cancel my cards, prevented me from ordering the rest of the parts that I need for the DAS, so it's going to be a little while before I'm able to finish it. I did, however, get a couple of USB adapters, or ordered a couple of USB adapters for the broken Razer Nari Ultimates that I have. I had originally found a set of 3 broken headsets that were listed on eBay for $2. I bought them quickly, only to have the order canceled due to the price being wrong. But that was the reason that I had ordered the USB dongles as replacements, since I figured that's what the issue was with those. $2 was too good to pass up. But with them ordered, I decided to take another look at my old ones and broken ones that I had in storage. I found them while looking for a very specific headset for Moss. The one that I used to use had an issue with the USB dongle, but after taking another look at it, I pulled out my needle files and cleaned up the connections and reshaped the outer casing a little so that it fit a little bit tighter, and it is working again. The other broken ones that I will be pairing to the new USB dongles all have broken hinges. But I think between them and the Razer Naris and the Razer Nari Essentials that I have that are broken, I'll be able to mix and match the hinges until I have the 3 working Nari Ultimate headsets. I was hoping that they would be here yesterday, but now they should be here tomorrow. I am familiar with the pairing process, but sadly it does require Windows to make it work correctly. And that's really been my last couple of weeks. Majid?
So it's interesting that, not only have you had security issues, but so have I. So it seems that the innards that we've got later is a good time for us to talk about it. But anyway, let me do my wanderings first. We've finally been getting some nice weather in the UK. I'm sure it's not going to last long, and in fact, actually, not long after writing this, the rain has started. The clear night skies meant I've been able to see some of the northern lights, so Aurora Borealis out here. I think I missed the best views, which were on Friday night, but I still got some decent views. Interestingly, the photos look better than what they did in reality. So I suppose my eyes aren't as good as my smartphone cameras. I've changed up some of the devices I have. I found a good deal on an XPS 13 7390 on eBay, and so use this as an opportunity to sell my Asus ZenBook. Now, that Asus ZenBook was a little bit of a disappointment in the sense that it was it was an Intel Evo i5 12th gen, I want to say, but it might have been 11th actually. No, it was 12th gen, and It was very nice, it was very thin, very sleek, but the battery life was terrible. It would overheat quite a lot. And it actually became a little bit uncomfortable, as it would warm up so much that, if you use it as a laptop in your lap, you sometimes had to get like a cushion or something. Um, this was the machine that I used to run Mint on. Um, but I'd even put a gnome session of Mint on it just for a laugh, just to see what would happen, which surprisingly worked quite well actually. But I reverted it back to Windows 11 prior to selling, and I managed to actually sell it quite quickly. I just put it up on Facebook, or selling this, and then a family friend kind of contacted me and said, "Are you selling this? I'm looking for one for my wife." And yeah, I managed to send it to him, and he sent me the money, and everything was good, and they seemed quite pleased with it. Um, I've also been changing things up from a distro perspective. Bill has obviously given me a bit of a hint of what happened. Because of the intense peer pressure in this team about running Arch, I decided that, hey, why not? Let's try Arch again. I mean, because what could possibly go wrong? Okay.
Turns out quite an awful lot.
Yeah. I also wanted to try out the new Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, and bearing in mind that there were issues from upgrading it from 23.10, which we discussed about last time, how it was a particular bug. I thought, well, let's put Endeavour OS on my laptop, which is a Lenovo Yoga with an AMD Ryzen 5. Because hey, what could go wrong? And although everything seemed to that machine used to run Ubuntu 23.10 as a dual boot. Because it was a work machine, I had to keep the Windows partition there. And I used the installer, which was Calamaris. It said it was taking care of all the partitioning, and it came up installation failed. Talked about this on OTC last week, and he thought it was because Arch doesn't do well with dual boots, which I thought was a bit odd because I have run Manjaro before as a dual boot without any issues. Anyway, after failing twice, I decided to forget this. And I wanted to use KDE Neon, so I just put KDE Neon on that box, and that's working absolutely fine. Ironically, for a desktop environment which is known for its configurability, the one thing you can't configure is the touchpad gestures. I can't even find an option for them, and when I looked around on the internet, it seems to be a thing that quite a few people have voiced concerns about. Anyway, so what I thought would be a great idea was nuke and pave my podcasting rig, which is this one, with Endeavour OS. Because hey, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah. So the installation was fine. I initially tried the Budgie desktop. I wasn't actually that impressed with it, actually. So I decided to go for KDE. Installation was smooth. But this is this is Arch, and it's more complicated than say Manjaro, which was my previous foray into the Arch world. Manjaro really was trying to make things user friendly. This isn't. There isn't a graphical software manager, and if you want software, you have to use the command line. There's not a lot of bundle software on the distro either. There's no LibreOffice, for example. And I found myself a bit uncomfortable using the command line because basically what I was doing was just copy pasting commands from the internet. And I'm not entirely sure what I was doing. And when I would start installing something, some prompt would come up and yes or no, and I'm kind of like, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do. So I thought I needed to get a graphical software manager. So I went for Pamac, which is what's used on Manjaro. Installing that took longer than the install of the base system. I mean, there were multiple prompts. Again, I don't know what I'm doing. I really didn't, honestly. And so I can't imagine this staying too long on the system. There's too much jank, and there's too much, this works, so this suddenly stops working, or that works, so that suddenly stops working. I'm sure I'm going to end up balking the system. I'm obviously far too much of a noob. It's very different to Ubuntu land, which is what I'm used to. So I think I'm going to have to. I mean, I suppose the other option is maybe go to Manjaro. I did quite like Manjaro, to be fair. It was more user friendly than this. Now, this is not to say that Endeavour OS is bad. I'm not trying to say that it's a bad distro. I'm just saying that maybe it's not for someone like me. That it's, you need to know a little bit more, and I just don't know enough to really benefit from it. And yes, there's possibilities of me making a big cock up. Speaking of Ubuntu land, I decided that I'd put Ubuntu 24.04 on the new Dell XPS, which I got. It's not new. I mean, it's a couple of years old, but it's in mint condition. Pretty easy installation. It works really well with the high DPI screen because this is the one that's got like the crazy high resolution. I decided to try and stick with snaps. Just after our discussions with Popey last time, I thought it's worth a shot. The snaps themselves seem to work okay, but I can see the concern that many people have about the maintenance of the software. I mean, I went to download some software and it turned out to be 3 years out of date. And so I think it's not going to be long before I, install Flatpaks onto it. There's still a little bit of jank, which is funny. So yesterday we were doing our mintCast meeting. I joined on the Discord through that laptop, and Bill was complaining that my audio was a complete mess. Yet the minute I put on Discord and went voice on my phone, it was working fine. So I'm just putting it down to the usual joys of Linux. Speaking of Flatpak, both the LibreOffice Flatpak and Snap seem to have some odd behavior. The top menu bar seems to disappear and things like that. I think I should have just got the deb package, actually. I got bored of listening to my wife complaining about her HP Elite, so I made her join the ThinkPad cult. I got a T570 for about $200 on eBay, 15-inch display, Core i5 8th Gen, 256 SSD. It's on Windows 10, and that's what it will stay on. I'm giving it to her to maintain, and I'm not going to be any tech support. Honest. Nah, that's not going to happen. I'm going to turn into tech support, aren't I? I'm looking forward to the new Mint 22 release based on 24.04. When chatting to Bill yesterday at the meeting, I realized I could get Ubuntu Cinnamon 24.04 and theme it to look like Mint. And hey, it's sort of Linux Mint 22. I'm being facetious. I know there's a lot more work to making a distro than an icon theme and a couple of wallpapers, but it seemed to be a good experiment to do. I mean, again, what could possibly go wrong? I saw the frankly nauseating Apple event regarding the new iPads. And now I was listening to a couple of podcasts, about the new iPad Pros and how, they're really, really pushing it's a replacement for your laptop. It's incredibly expensive. A fully kitted out iPad Pro 12.9 with all the bells and whistles and keyboard and everything like that is north of $3,000. I mean, that's just, if you've got that much money, I suppose you are obviously nuts, but
That's a big nope.
yeah. And, and you could get a very, very good MacBook Pro for that. So it's, but anywho, I did find it interesting that they released the M4 chip in the iPad first rather than the M3. And then London actually put up a very interesting article in our Discord explaining why. And it was to do with the fact that the M3 fabrication process wasn't very good. It was causing them problems. And so they just decided to then stick to the next one. Now, TSMC is the one the company that's making it. And basically, Apple just blocked everybody else and said, look, we want all of them. And so they ended up with all these crap chips, and hence they've not even bothered putting it into the iPad, the M3, and moved straight to the M4, which is, again, a 3nm process, but it's second generation, whatever that means. Anyway, it just, but, seeing all this coverage and listening to the podcast about this kind of stuff made me reflect on my own tablet choices. I have a Samsung Galaxy Tab S8, which has a great 12-inch AMOLED screen. It's brilliant for media, lying in bed, watching telly, but not a huge amount else. I think it's just a bit too unwieldy for reading or playing games. It's good for note-taking. And the S Pen is, having now tried a couple of styluses, or whatever the plural of stylus is, Samsung's is the best. It just is. They've obviously been out doing it for longer, with the notes and whatever. It's better than the Apple Pencil, and it's better than the OnePlus styler, which I'll get into in a second. Because it seems that OnePlus are heavily discounting their OnePlus Pad, which was released about a year ago. I think a successor is on the way, and hence the discounting. And at 11 inches, I think actually it makes a better form factor for reading and for playing games. I mean, I'm one of these guys that I used to quite like the old 8-inch tablets, Nexus 7s, the smaller Galaxy tabs. I used to quite like them. Go on, sorry, Joe, you're going to say something?
Yeah, well, the whole thing is the reason most people don't make 8-inch tablets anymore is because that's basically the size of modern phones.
Yeah, no, which I completely understand, actually. I mean, but anyway, but I used to like that as a form factor. I used to think that that was a good middle ground. Anyway, so I managed to get a OnePlus Pad with the keyboard and stylus for about $400, which I thought was pretty good. It's very early days. I mean, it only came yesterday. But it looks a lot more flexible than that Tab S8 was. The stylus isn't as good as the one on the Galaxy, but it's still pretty decent. The keyboard's also pretty decent as well. I mean, I didn't have a keyboard for the Galaxy Tab. And so let's see how it goes. And yeah, it is just a little bit easier for reading if I want to read, Kindle books or whatever. My Mega Cloud service was playing up a bit. I don't know if it's because I was having all these new devices coming up and registering and whatever, but I was having a lot of sync errors and doubling of files. I managed to get it sorted out in the end and found out, interestingly, that Mega hadn't logged me out of any of my previous devices, which I'd installed over the last 4 years. I mean, I don't think it led to any harm, but it was a little bit okay. That's a bit odd. Now I do have 100 gig of Google Drive storage, which I pay for, and 100 gig of OneDrive storage, which I got as a promotion for when I got my Galaxy phone. So I tried mounting them. It's pretty easy to do in GNOME. Wasn't so easy in KDE. Now, maybe you guys can help me. What exactly is the difference between like mounting these drives, on Nautilus or Nemo or whatever, and having a specific sync client?
Well, mounting them as opposed to a sync client, it means that you're mounting them as a drive, which I used to do with fuse mounts.
Mm-hmm.
But each of the services that I had would eventually block fuse mounting, and then they'd find another way to fuse mount, and then that would get blocked again. So you're mounting it as a local drive. Now, a local sync is different in that it's taking one of your drive's space
Mm-hmm.
and syncing the files from their location to your location, and then you make an update, and then that syncs across to their location.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The biggest difference is without it being mounted in a local directory, applications may not have access to it.
Okay.
So if
All right.
because when an application starts up, it can see, because it's a locally installed application, it can see, well, unless it's containerized, leave all that aside, it can see what's right there on the system. And when something is mounted, even if it's a remote file system, if it's mounted through Fuse or whatever other way on the local file system, then the application just sees it the same way as it would any file anywhere else on your system.
Okay. Anyway, as I said, it worked pretty easily in GNOME online accounts, but not in KDE. And I found out that this is actually a common bug. It's to do with one of the I think it's one of the sign-in APIs or something, and it requires the KDE people to change something, and they haven't. And so there's some angst on the internet about how they've not done that. Anyway, so I just left it, and then actually, after kind of logging out and doing a couple of other jiggery pokery, Mega seems to fix itself, and so we're fine. Outside of tech, I lost patience with Constellation. I mean, it's good, but it was just so bloody slow. Even when I put the bloody speed up and watching it at 1.5 or twice the speed, it was still too slow. So I gave up and just forget that. Started Shogun on Disney. That's actually quite good, actually. I don't know.
Fantastic.
It's really good, actually. I quite like it. I started Baby Reindeer on Netflix with the wife, as it looked like a bit of a black comedy, which it is. But then it starts getting dark, and it starts getting like really dark, like to the extent of, this episode has things which people might find disturbing kind of notices at the beginning. Um, and so me and my wife thought, well, this is supposed to be a fun comedy thing that we are watching. Maybe not, eh? So we want to move on to something else, which we haven't decided. Any suggestions on kind of something light and breezy? Do let me know.
Trigun Stampede.
Which one?
Trigun Stampede.
Okay, I'll try that out. So after 5 years of bullying from my daughter, I finally relented, and we bought a cat. I thought I could see it through. I thought I could hold my nerve longer, but she beat me. Anyways, we bought this kitten last week, which is basically so bloody scared it hasn't moved out of the garage since for the last week. The only reason we know it's alive is because the food gets eaten. Poor little mite. It's only 4 months old. It's very cute. But yeah, I think it's going to take a bit of time to get used to us. Was planning on going up north for this for an Islamic event, but it would have required setting off back home quite late, so I decided against it. I've got to the age where driving in the middle of the night, nah, not a good idea, unless I've got very, very loud heavy metal on. That's the only thing that keeps me awake. Work has been all right. CNHS. I'm not enjoying a lot of this management and teaching stuff as much as I thought I was. Clinical stuff is so much more fulfilling. I remember when I was a junior, I would hear bosses of mine say, all this management crap, forget this. I just wish I could just come to work, look after my patients, and go home. And that was it. I'm kind of turning into that curmudgeonly old man. So, on that bombshell, that's my wanderings done.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, 0, please.
All right.
Alrighty then.
Go ahead, Majid.
3, 2, 1, 0.
0.
Thank you. That just helps me because when it gets to be 3 hours, it can get out of whack.
We haven't even hit 2 hours yet, have we?
No,
Yeah.
I'd like to put it in the center that way.
Fair enough. Just,
All right.
Just give me 1 second. Quick loo break. If you guys want to start the innards, you can, Bob. Just give me 1 sec, yeah?
Starting without him? Maybe, I guess. He'll run and probably get it all over his leg.
Right. The last drop. Right down the leg. Family show.
It is. We can just hope the general people don't know what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but thanks for sending me those hard drives.
Yeah.
I will hopefully be able to get everything set up this week and get the cable ordered and the PCI card in. That's going to be, finding time to shut everything down long enough to get that PCIe card in. But because it's an X8, I should be able to have the extra space on the motherboard to have it 2 slots over from the graphics card that you sent me. So
that was no doubt somebody that was making DVDs, when that was all the rave 10,
right.
15 years ago.
Right. And those things still aren't cheap. Have you priced those?
No. What, the internal drives or the
DVD duplicator boxes?
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
I thought people were building those things. I didn't know anybody was.
No, you can buy them. You can buy them. But like I said, somebody didn't want this one anymore, so I got it for free.
I mean, it's got to have all the SATA connections that you need. How is it handling that? Has it got a PCI card or something?
It's got its own proprietary card in it that's built specifically for this. So it does have the cables, but I can't use that the control board that's in it. So I won't need it.
Why can't you use it because of Linux?
There's no operating, well, whatever operating system is on it, there's no IO to it. I mean, this thing is
Oh,
designed specifically to, have a, a DVD in one of the drives, and then whatever other drives has disks in it, it's going to replicate it to at the push of a button.
oh,
There's no IO.
okay.
There's just that little control panel to duplicate, and that's it.
Wow. So you mostly just have a tower there.
Yeah, it doesn't even have like the connections for or the standoffs for a motherboard or anything like that, which I also don't need because I'm just hooking everything up over a cable. But it does have the power supply with all of the SATA power connections, and
Oh,
then
cool.
an IDE connector, the IDE power connector. I forget what that specifically is called. That runs the fans to help keep everything cool.
Huh.
So, and it should be more than powerful enough just to run some hard drives. So,
So is it? You said it didn't have the standoffs. You can't put like a ATX motherboard in it. It's
it's
just
not built for that. I mean, it's got enough size that if I were to, be willing to do
drill
some
holes.
drilling,
Yeah.
that I could do it, but it's not built for that.
Hmm.
And it has no cutout in the back for the IO.
Oh, okay. Well, make a nice array though.
Yeah, I think it will.
If it, I mean, it's all about cooling and space with all
Yeah,
that.
I might add some standoffs to the bottom to hold it up, and then put a couple 120 millimeter fans because it does have the cutouts in the bottom, the holes in the bottom for fans. So I might do that to add some extra cooling if that ends up being an issue. Or what I could do is move the adapters that hold the hard drives on back just a little bit and put 120 millimeter fans in the front.
Yeah.
But, anyways, now that Majid is back, let's move on to the Linux innards.
So this week we're going to discuss some best practices for good tech hygiene and safety while using technology. More specifically, we're going to talk about some of the things that can be done to help to keep you and your family safe when using all the devices and services that have become so prolific in society today. We'll then talk about some of the things that we've done in effort to keep ourselves and our families safe in the world, which sometimes gets us into trouble, and sometimes doesn't. Um, I mean, nowadays you could say that there's more ways to get into trouble than not, I suppose. One of the things I think that's, if we're just going to take a little bit, if we take just a step back and we think about how much more prolific technology has become. 15 years ago, most of us had a computer. We would have had a normal mobile phone.
And that
And that,
computer would have been some sort of gated garden like
yeah.
AOL or MSN or something like that.
Mm.
And
and and that's kind of about it, really.
yeah.
I mean, I think we did this once as a bit of a joke, didn't we? I mean, how many devices have we got connected to our Wi-Fi? I
Mm.
mean, it's easily into double figures, or in the case of Bill, triple figures probably.
At least 30 plus every time I check.
And so, and it happens very quickly. I mean, when you start thinking about it, everybody's got a laptop, everybody's got a mobile phone, at least one. A lot of people have got tablets, and then there's all the smart speakers and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of attack vectors, if you want to put it in security speak.
Yeah.
And yet, in one sense, a lot of the safety things that we're going to mention are sounds things which sound pretty bog standard, but actually are very important. Things which are like, you know, don't reply to emails from people you don't know. Don't, press links on things you're not sure about. You get a random message from someone you very rarely hear from. Then take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. Um, children are what one company called digital natives. They've grown up with a lot of this technology, from a very early age. It's all they've ever known. A phone is a portal to the internet. I remember we moved house and our Wi-Fi wasn't working for 2, 3 days. It was like the kids didn't know what the hell to do. It was like their brains didn't function without Wi-Fi.
That always
Uh,
feels like a failure in parenting too, when something like that happens, and then all of a sudden they're just wandering around the house like
yeah, which
waiting.
is, I mean, it was funny for me actually. I found it quite hilarious
Yeah.
actually. But And so I suppose one of the things actually we could talk about, which is something because I don't know much about it, and I'm sure Bill does and Joe does, is DNS. What exactly is a DNS, and how does that help improve online safety for all of us?
I don't know if it actually does improve online safety. It's a dynamic naming service. I mean, it just makes it so that you have a static IP address.
Hmm.
Well, there's things you can do. There's abstractions you can put into place because some attack surfaces will use DNS as a way to figure out who you are or what you're doing. And to put it simply, DNS is just the yellow pages of the internet. So when you type in https://facebook.com, your browser says, okay, I don't know who that is. So they go to DNS and look up who has the domain facebook.com. Well, that resolves to IP address 205.122.
It,
Such and such such
it's
such.
essentially, yeah, making it so that you're not having to type out the IP address, the numbered IP
Yeah.
address of any location that you want to go to. Um, Now, as for, I guess the easiest way that it can add safety is to not use your IPs, because then they get all that information and they get to sell it. And probably also shouldn't use Google's, because obviously they're going to be selling your information.
Yeah.
But like, there is ad block DNS, which could be useful if you don't want to set up like a DNS sinkhole, or if you want to use it as a backup to a DNS sinkhole. And that will prevent ads and malicious ads on your network. So that could definitely, provide another layer of safety.
What exactly is a DNS sinkhole then?
A DNS sinkhole is like Pi-hole. It's ad blocking. It basically blocks all the DNSs that are known to either be malicious or ad based.
Hmm.
So instead of going out to one of the DNS providers that are out there, like 8.8.8.8, which is Google, or 1.1.1.1, which is
Cloudflare.
Cloudflare, um, it will go first to your DNS sinkhole or Pi-hole, and it will check the DNS that you're trying to go to, or check all of the requests from the location that you're trying to go to. And if any of them are known to be ad providers or malicious, it will automatically block them. And then it will go from there, it will go out to your chosen DNS provider, and then it will resolve the address. So if you're thinking it's going to slow you down, believe me, it's milliseconds, and the
Hmm.
amount you save because of not having those ads flowed more than balances that out.
Yeah, I think you actually get a little speed out of it because the amount of data that's coming back from the DNS request, uh, if you don't have anything sitting in the way of your browser and the DNS, is will far outweigh the amount of time it takes to have another layer of abstraction between the browser and your DNS provider.
Okay, so okay, so I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's great if you know what's malicious and or suspicious.
Well,
But
that's the good news. The people that make Pi-hole, they've got a list already made for you, and
yeah,
then
true.
beyond that, there's a whole community of people
There's a
that,
whole like GitHub library of
yeah.
just lists of DNS lists to block stuff. So it depends on the level of security that you want.
Yeah. No, so I'm just saying that doesn't stop one that is unknown.
Correct.
So this is a very, very community effort. So the people that are active in that are constantly looking for new uh, IP address, malicious IP addresses that stuff is coming from. And let me tell you, if you ever look, because you can, when you install Pi-hole, you can run a little monitoring interface that you access through the browser, and the amount of stuff that gets blocked is just staggering. I mean, there's no there's no other way to describe it. And then if you add even more block lists to it, which is all you're doing, is you're getting the block list from either GitHub or I can't remember. There's other places, and then those lists are kept up to date. You run there's an update command for Pi-hole, and it goes and if there's any updates to this list, it pulls those updates. So that's not this isn't a static thing that you throw on there and then you got to monitor
Hmm.
it yourself.
Hmm.
The people that do Pi-hole, they keep these things up and running. But I mean, what a lot of people probably wonder is, okay, that sounds great, but and I would argue at the very least, get on your router and uh, change your DNS settings to something other than your ISP.
IP, yeah,
Yeah,
your
because
ISP.
uh, just change. I know a lot of people. We're not supposed to like Cloudflare, but I do use Cloudflare's. They do a lot of malicious blocking right there within their own. They do a lot of work to keep track of the people that are not necessarily ads, but malicious domains, and they will block them on the DNS side. And your ISP is doing none of that.
Hmm.
To be fair, maybe some, if something gets to be really really bad, they'll block it, but Cloudflare will do a much better job of it at the bare minimum, and you can do that on your router on your DNS settings. DNS can be changed on a device level too, which is what I had to do because I tried putting everybody on my Pi-hole, but
Hmm.
then my wife can't play her silly little games on her phone, so I had to
Because they require ads for
because they
you to be able to do
require,
anything.
yeah,
Hmm.
for her to get her little
Yeah, I was going
monthly
to say
feed.
this isn't that one of the pitfalls?
It
Because
is,
okay, because we're techie enough to be able to do something about it, but there's another 5, 6 people in the house.
yeah.
You know.
And the reality is with these things, you have to, unless you're really gonna buckle down on this stuff, but then you kind of have to get people on your side. In my wife's case, she doesn't use her phone to do any financial stuff at all. She doesn't have a single thing. She's got Amazon. I don't worry about apps like Amazon so much though, because I feel like they're aggressive enough with their development to keep bad things from.
Okay.
Now, I recently had.
Sorry,
I
can I
re-
just make a point
Go ahead.
about Amazon? Sorry. You are probably correct. Again, you have to understand that not everybody in your household may be as technologically literate as yourself, right?
Yeah.
And things which seem barn door obvious may not be. So just today, I was sat with my wife, and she said she was looking for a book that she wanted to buy off Amazon, and I was looking for it, and I was like, okay, you can get this as an audio book. Do you want to listen? Do you want it as an audio book instead? And she kind of went, yeah, okay. I said, all right, fine. So we're gonna have to. Let's sign you up for Audible. You get a 30-day free trial thing. See what you reckon. And then at that point, I went, so shall we log on to your Amazon? She goes, yeah, my email address changed. Excuse me. What do you mean your email address changed? Yeah, no, I mean, I go on my email thing now and it's got some random thing .ru.
Yeah.
What? Excuse me? What? Yeah, no, it happened a couple of months ago. I don't get
Ah,
any confirmations anymore or things like
Dot
that.
ru.
And I went, oh my lord. I went, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And then I went through whole of Amazon history, and I went, I look, is there anything here that you didn't order? And she went, no, 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 this is all stuff that I ordered. And to be honest, she doesn't actually order a huge amount off Amazon because I'm the Prime customer, and so she will find what she wants, send it to me, and I buy it because I'm on Prime. But there had been one or two things, and then I went, where's this email come from? I said, she does, I don't know. And for some reason it keeps calling me Alex. Oh my lord. Okay. Yeah, again, it's been last couple of months, it's been going on, and when I go to log in, it says, hi Alex. I have no idea why. And you didn't think any of this was suspicious? Well, no, because I don't actually order that much, and everything else seemed fine. I was like, okay, I think your account's been taken over, And then we had this really long and awkward conversation with. I have to rang Amazon because that was the only way I could get in. Couldn't change the email address. Couldn't change. The one thing I was able to do at least was delete the credit card that was on there, so that at least. But who knows how long somebody has had access to that account? Yeah, and whatever they were doing, and so contacted Amazon. Amazon said, yeah, it looks like someone's taken over your account. It's not the email that you originally put in. Your phone number is still the same phone number, but the email is different. Okay, we're just going to stop this now, put a hold on your account and things like that. I went, fine. And then I went, should we just have a look at your credit card history? Just make sure there's nothing that you don't recognize. And then she keeps going. And after like about a month earlier, I don't recognize that transaction. What's that? I don't remember ever buying anything from that store. I went, oh my lord, okay. So then, we get hold of a bank, speak to the bank, and the bank then comes up and, okay, fine, we're going to just report this as a possible fraudulent transaction. We're going to block your card. We'll send you another card out, and this, that, and the other. And she was like, oh, thank you for sorting it out. I only found that out by chance. She had sat there with this random email address with random names coming through, no online confirmations of her stuff for at least a couple of months, thinking that, oh, just some bug probably. So this is my point about, a lot of stuff seems to us to be really barred or obvious. Don't click on this, don't click on that, don't do this, don't do
Well,
that. But people do need to be told, unfortunately.
it's like with my credit card. I mean, I wasn't even looking at that for fraud. But when the stuff came up with my debit card, I decided to go in and check all of my accounts. So I don't use my credit card very often. Maybe for the occasional large purchase, which I'll then go and either pay off over time to help my credit rating or pay off immediately because, I just needed the card for that one thing. So I went through and looked at the transactions, and it was there were two $10 monthly transactions that had come up from a company that I had never heard of. I think it was landings.com with two S's. And that's the only way I knew was because I went in and checked, and there were very few transactions, but these two came up, and it evidently my card had been took for a couple of months and small transactions.
And so I think that people assume that if your card details are compromised, then what that means is the person wanted your credit card details and then it's going to make loads of purchases and you're going to rack up the credit card bill. And that is true. That is a thing that a lot of these nefarious people do. But I think a lot of the other way of making money from when it comes to credit card details is stealing them and then selling them on. And I wonder whether that is what had happened to my wife's, in that they'd not bought anything significant with her card, but maybe that is now on some website somewhere, as I can sell you, because I've seen it. I've seen PayPal addresses for sale. I've seen credit card details for sale, Netflix passwords for sale, all this kind of stuff. And so I think that's one thing you also need to realize, that it's the information that you're giving out in of itself has value, whether it's actually used or not. In the same, it's like what we talk about in a more general sense, that data is so, people make so much money from data. Google makes so much, another big tech makes so much money from our data. And that's true for crooks as well. Which is why, I mean, which I suppose we'll get to a little bit later. But I always say, if you're going to buy stuff online, use your credit card, because it's not. It's a very crude way of putting it, and it's not necessarily 100% true, but it's the bank's money, and so the bank is a lot more proactive about sorting that out than if it's your debit card. Because if it's your debit card, well, it's your money, and so the bank will do stuff, but at least in my experience, they've never been as proactive.
Yeah,
I don't know if
and I
that's I don't, I
find
don't know
that
if that's
So
what
they
too.
you
do.
found.
But let me say another thing there. Another good thing that you can do is get a prepaid debit card that
Mm,
doesn't allow for overdraft.
yeah.
And you only put the amount of money that you need on it. So if you're going to a jank website, yes, your name needs to be on the card, so you get one through your bank. That's specifically a prepaid debit card, and you only have the amount that you need on there. So you're going to a website that you don't trust or that you never used before. You use this debit card. You put the money on it that you need, and it's just that transaction. And then if it gets stole, get rid of it, get another one. You
So
That
haven't
that
and
lost any
is
money.
so that
virtual
is a
debit
brilliant
cards.
idea, and
Yeah.
actually that is something that I've started doing with a lot of the kind of new inverted commas, fintech banks or lending societies. So like the Revoluts, the Starlings, the Monzos, the Monies, these kinds of startup banks and financial providers. I know technically Revolut is not a bank in the UK, but you know what I mean. Um, and I use it like that. I put money on there, and if you're then using it to buy anything, they'll even give you a one-time use card number, which you only use that one time, and then it's dead after that. And I think that's also a good way of using. So I mean, I've done that. I've got my main bank account. I've got a Monzo account. I want to buy something online. I'll transfer the money from my normal bank account to the Monzo, which has no overdraft, as you say. It's whatever prepaid money I've put on there. I then use that to buy or to sell or whatever, and it's just a way, it's a way of making a little bit of distance between your actual main account and the transactions that you're trying to do. I mean, I saw Bill had put in the show notes as well about using PayPal, because PayPal is also a kind of a way of having an extra barrier. The only problem with PayPal is that there's fees involved in that. So to give the example again this week of the Asus ZenBook that I sold it for $470. The guy I sold it to sent me $470 via PayPal, but I got 450 something because those were PayPal's fees. And afterwards, I thought to myself, you know what? I should have just told him. I should have just given my bank transfer details, but the separate one, the Monzo or the Revolut or whatever, and told him to transfer to that, and then at least neither of us would have been out of pocket. Um, but yeah, having some distance between your main source of money. It's the same reason why most of us don't go around with our life savings in our pockets. Do you know what I mean? We have a wallet, but it's not the cards or the access to your main things, is it? Just that's just life, isn't it? Same thing, especially now when you've got Google Pay or Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or whatever. I'm very reticent to put anything which if my phone ever got lost, people could just use to keep paying and paying and paying. Especially since contactless limits. I don't know what they're like in the States yet, but it's hit £100 here, which I always think is far too much. But yeah, I think COVID had something to do with that because everybody went contactless after that. But yeah, I suppose we've kind of moved on to money when really we was talking a bit more about just general safety. So we talked a little bit about pie hole and that kind of thing. Also, you know, um, downloading files, especially games and things like that. Especially if you're one of these people that maybe download stuff of a questionable legality from torrent sites or something. You got to be careful what you're doing. when you're on
The
when
same
you're on those
rules
things.
apply to that as they always have. Understand who you're getting the data from, and on Windows, the traditional wisdom was to scan it for viruses before you unpack it or whatever, or before you execute it. Um, I would say in our world, in the Linux world, you probably have a little less of that because maybe for one reason or another we're a little less vulnerable. I don't know, but I think just keeping a level of understanding of the things you're getting, where they're coming from. Now, when you're talking about downloading, as you say, questionably ethical materials from the internet, you're kind of in a different world right there. You're in a world where that you're very likely to run into,
Yeah,
let's
here be
say,
dragons, basically.
yeah,
Here be
yeah,
dragons. Yeah,
right. And so you'll take the necessary steps to keep yourself as safe as possible with that. Um, there's there's mitigations you can put in place, virtual file systems and stuff to keep things siloed off. But I'm not sure how much we should how much of a tutorial we should do about keeping people safe when they're illegally downloading material. But
yeah.
um,
Yes, maybe not so much, but but you made an interesting point there. When I was setting up the new laptop, the ThinkPad for my wife, I did wonder, do I still need to get an antivirus onto this? Or is Windows Defender now good enough? And
yes,
I asked around I asked a couple of people like yourselves and others, and they were very much like, yeah, Windows Defender is probably good enough.
Yeah,
But
and do you really trust any of those antivirus providers like McAfee, who has had data breaches,
yeah,
or any of the other ones that
and
you pay for, and they still want to serve ads to you for
hmm
forever?
And
So,
honestly, they don't have any more updated definitions than Microsoft does. The
and
only
they
thing
take
is they're offering flashier software that can give you these maps and things in it.
and they take up
Meanwhile,
so much background process
oh
that you
yeah,
mm,
might as well be running a 20-year-old computer.
yeah.
yeah,
So I didn't install one on there. Um, yes, you. I mean, in one sense, we are fortunate in the Linux world that it's less of an issue for us. I mean, there's a variety of reasons, isn't it? Some say it's just because of the low market share. Others say it's to do with the actual technologies involved. Whatever it is, but that doesn't mean that you can just download stuff willy nilly without knowing, as you say, where it is that you're getting it from. You know.
and
Um,
especially if you're on a network
mm,
with Android devices and Windows devices and gaming. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Kids, they get a lot of stuff from the games. I don't know a lot about it, but I know that there is kids that do a lot of gaming. They accumulate a lot of magic beans from all the games they play, and these are assets that can be lost. And all of these devices in a home are networked together, and you have to, even if you're on a Linux machine, yeah, we fall into that trap, don't we, where we think that, well, we're really not vulnerable to the same kind of things that everybody else is, but we are vulnerable in a way that our machines are sitting on the same network and they can pass,
mm,
they can be kind of a host or a transient for some of these things to machines on the network that are vulnerable. So,
yeah, and it's actually. I mean, that reminds me of another point actually. Like I was mentioning about, our kids are on, all these different devices and things like that. They don't seem to have the same kind of reticence that we may have when it comes to sharing personal information. My daughter has recently got into gacha. I don't know if you guys have come across it. It's basically anime and this kind of, you draw and you post it up on YouTube or whatever. And she managed to make her own YouTube channel, and started uploading her own kind of cartoons that she was, making herself, and she was chatting to people in the YouTube comments and telling her them her real name and how old she was. She's 11. And
Oh
at a
wow.
certain point, yeah, and I was kind of like, whoa, whoa, what the hell are you doing? And I was saying to my wife, I've got she has a mobile phone, but it's got Google Family Link on it. I've got all sorts of restrictions on it. I thought I'd done everything. Yeah. And my wife was like, "Oh yeah, because that only works for like 2 hours, and then switches off. I let her use mine." Oh God.
We
And you're just kind of like, okay, fine, all right. And then she became very upset when I forcibly went and said, "Look, I'm deleting your YouTube profile. I'm deleting your YouTube videos. You are not old enough to be talking to me. Oh no, but he's just a boy. He's in America. Yeah, as if he's really a boy in America. Right? I bet that's true.
he might
Not.
have been a boy at one time.
Yeah, it's probably some 45-year-old guy. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the point being is that they just don't seem to have that understanding in the same way. Now, you could call that youth in general. But I suppose it's with great power there's great responsibility, and these, by definition, are people who don't have much responsibility because they're kids. Um, but again, it shows how much of a steward you need to be, even if you think you've done everything. Like I thought I'd done everything. It's there's the human aspect of it, and one of the things we put in the show notes is about limiting the amount of time that we have that we allow our kids to use technology. We're all terrible at it. We're all rubbish at setting boundaries. Sometimes it's just easier just to give in rather than argue. um, but it's a very slippery slope, and it's very easy for it to all go horribly wrong.
The human aspect. Oh my gosh, that is so true because you could set up all these abstractions. You can have all these tools in place, and the human thing is going to get us every time,
Yeah.
because we're always going to run into cases where the whatever mitigations we put in place are just too inconvenient, and we think, well, we will just make this one exception for this time, and then, it's just for now. But then that becomes the rule. The exception becomes the rule, and then we move into a dangerous territory from there. It's very important to be diligent with these things. Uh, and like I wrote in the notes, admitted everyone's terrible at it. We absolutely are, because
Oh yeah.
I gotta admit right now. Now my kids are only allowed to play video games on weekends, but they play a lot on the weekends, and I have absolutely no idea what's going on up there. As much as I'm into everything that goes on in this network, and it's all managed by hardware right down here, I have no idea
As
what
soon
the.
as you hand them a phone, that kind of ends, though.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
they've got phones, and they mostly, I don't know, these kids. I haven't quite put my finger on it because they're more into the Xbox games during the weekends, and then their phones during the week. But they don't play a lot of games on them because I haven't given them very good phones.
hmm.
Uh,
So I think that's actually one way of uh,
yeah, you give them
mitigating. Genuinely,
crappy
I do it.
technology.
Oh yeah. So my
Look,
son, I remember when my son was. I mean, he's hitting 20 now. But when this was about maybe
God,
seven,
you're so
8 years
old.
ago. I know I'm so old. I maybe this one. It must be when he was about 14, 15. He was at school, and young boys doing young teenagers doing teenagers things, looking at some dodgy pictures. They get caught by the teachers at school. He gets into trouble and all this kind of stuff, and we were like, okay, fine, I'm taking your phone off you, full stop. You're not having a phone anymore, right?
Mm.
And then after a while, it was like, okay, well, we do actually need to be in contact with him when he's on the bus and this, that, and the other. So, okay, I got him a dumb phone, good old Nokia. I mean, it wasn't a 3310, but it was that style, of phone. You should have seen him the way
Oh
he was with
God.
that phone. It was hilarious. The way he would come home and the way he would throw it down, as if, what kind of piece of shit is this? And it'd be like, yeah, well, you ended up here. And then anyway, after a
That's the
while,
pinnacle of 1990s technology right
Yeah,
there.
that's
yeah, and then after a while, he because WhatsApp became more and more of a thing, isn't it? And so I said, okay, well, everything's been all right for the last year. You've not got yourself into any trouble or anything like that. Okay, I'll start loosening up a little bit. And I got him the crappiest smartphone I could think of, which was some 70 quid thing off Amazon, painfully slow.
oh,
Yes, you could go on WhatsApp, yes, you could go on the internet and Instagram, but it wasn't fun. Yeah. And yeah, he had to manage. And again, you should have seen the way he treated that phone. Oh, this piece of shit. It's like, again, mate, you got yourself into this.
Right. Yeah.
But it worked. It
Well,
worked.
it worked then. I
Yeah.
mean, I could probably find some older phone that's not getting updates anymore for my son, but he currently has like the OnePlus Nord N200, which is like the cheapest phone that you can get from T-Mobile, and
Hmm.
it's got a brilliantly awesome screen, and it
Hmm.
will run basically everything and anything. He has no problems with it, and he's able to load games on it whether I want him to or not. But from my perspective, the school hands him a Chromebook anyway, and their restrictions are garbage.
Hmm.
And he has gotten in trouble a couple of times for either reading manga at school or watching anime at school when he's not supposed to be on his Chromebook.
So
So
so we
even
haven't got that far. We haven't got that far when it comes to provision of devices to kids. The closest we've got to is my middle son, who is now at college. I'm not sure. Would it still be high school for you guys? He's 17. But anyway, this is the first time he was given the device, and it was, yeah, some Lenovo Chromebook. But generally speaking, so far in this country, in the Chromebooks or other laptops haven't kicked off in the same way as they have in the States, because I hear that Chromebooks are ubiquitous in schools now.
my
Um,
daughter. They here it's oh gosh, I can't stand these people. Here it's like some schools do ThinkPads, some schools do Chromebooks, and you just some grades will do Chromebooks, some teachers will do Chromebooks. It's they've given the power to everybody to decide who's going to use what, and it's absolutely ridiculous
yeah,
because
like on our home network and even with his cell phone, I could go into my DNS sinkhole and I can block all the websites that I don't want him to have access to, or I could use regex and block certain keywords like manga or manhwa or whatever the heck else it is that he's reading, or fan fiction, and really make my daughters angry. But and go in and basically block his internet service on the cell phones, but then he can just take his Chromebook to school and get in trouble with it there. So,
or work out how to do a VPN
or
and
work out how to do a VPN.
yes,
There's
yeah,
plenty of free ones.
yes. Actually, that's a good segue. We can talk a bit about
yeah.
VPNs. So go on, Bill. What is a VPN?
So
VPN?
a VPN is a virtual private network. Now, what's that mean? What it basically means is you're tunneling all your traffic off to a encrypted network somewhere else besides just the usual protocol of your device to the
Oh,
tower.
you're using an encrypted tunnel to get to a network.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then depending on what happens once you get on that network, most the big spiel or their whole shtick, these companies that are selling VPN services, is that we operate in countries that don't require us to keep logs of everything that's happening on this network. Because yes, you have established an encrypted tunnel from you to this endpoint or this node, and then from that node you are running your actual traffic.
Now,
And it's
the key
useful. Go ahead.
the key thing here is you're passing the trust.
Yeah.
So you're passing the trust from whatever location you're at to your VPN provider. Or if you're VPNing to home, then you're passing it to your internet service provider.
Now, if you're passing it to your home, now see that's interesting because there's two very distinctly different use cases for VPNs. One is when you've got a WireGuard set up like me. I've got a WireGuard endpoint here on one of these servers where I can tunnel into my home with either my laptop or even my phone. If I need to do anything to any of the servers, I can update. I can anything I can do here at this machine, I can do through through the VPN, through WireGuard on the road anywhere, and that's one use case. The other use case is when you are actually wanting to hide the things you are doing. You are sending your traffic off to a another network somewhere in the world where they're not keeping, okay, this, in air quotes, somewhere else in the world where they're not supposed to be keeping track. And if they do, you are anonymized by the encryption that you're using. And this is the way it's supposed to work. This is the way we're told it works. And so you can get away with downloading your torrent files and things like that because all of that traffic is encrypted.
A couple other use cases. There are. Now, an extension of what you've already said is if you are on a public Wi-Fi, then you should not trust anything. If you're on someone else's Wi-Fi, you should not trust anything. And you need a VPN either to your home or to a provider that does not do logging, preferably, in order to protect yourself and everything that you have access to, because there are ways for them to access the things on your phone, if security is not properly implemented, then they could access some of your passwords as you use them, your bank account information, et cetera, et cetera. The authentication keys that get used between yourself and whatever thing you're logging into, things like that. But another one is like I will use my VPN if I'm doing a search on anything medically related because I don't want to get ads about whatever medical problem that I'm having. And I really don't want anyone else knowing what other medical problems that I have. Things like that. It's none of my internet service provider's business. It's none of whatever Wi-Fi I'm on's business. So what I'm doing is not anyone else's business. So I'm going to use a VPN just about everywhere. Now, for my regular traffic at home, I'm not using a VPN, et cetera, et cetera. But I do have them set up so that I can access them within a couple of clicks on whatever machine that I'm on.
So there was a interesting video by Chris Titus Tech where he did a tier list of different VPN providers. And I thought, oh, this would be interesting. And basically, he was rubbishing most of them, saying that a lot of them are not anywhere near as private as you might think because they are located in countries which might be part of the Five Eyes Alliance, the 14 Eyes, the 19 Eyes, whatever. There's all these different things. So that if a government was did ask for the logs, which allegedly they don't keep, they would have to give them. Now, this always starts that whole conversation of, well, if you've got nothing to hide, then why are you bothered by it? But then, as you say,
in the words of Kevin Mitnick, you might not have anything to hide, but you've got everything to protect.
Exactly, yeah. And, why should anybody else know your business? And so, anyway, I mean, you can go check out his video if you really want. We should put that and check this out, actually.
But That's another use for a VPN, is getting around region locks.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different VPN providers. You know, we've heard of the big ones like say NordVPN, Surfshark. I mean, because they're bloody sponsor
Proton,
everything. Yeah,
PIN.
yeah. You know, you go on any YouTube channel or podcast. You know, it seems that they're sponsoring. You know, ExpressVPN is or whatever. But then there's some that are like built into the browser. Like Opera has a VPN. Brave has their own VPN. Hell, Google has a VPN. So, how do you know which VPN is going to be good for your
See,
safety?
Look,
that's
Or,
look, Google VPN is going to sell your information.
well, yeah,
yeah.
exactly, because
It's
that's the whole
Google.
point.
I mean, that only makes sense. Like, hey guys, you gotta know what that meaning was like. Hey guys, you know how people are starting to use VPNs now? What if we give them the VPN for free, and then we can get not only the data that they don't want us to have, we can have all the data that they're trying to, that they're trying to hide too, and yeah. I okay. So the reason I put this in the list here is because it's important in the conversation of security to have the right level of expectation from a VPN. Don't Because it is really sold to us as this one-stop shop. Like, go get NordVPN or public internet access, and everything you do is hidden. Everything you do is safe. All of your people can't get at your uh, payment credentials or anything like that, and it creates another unreasonable expectation. Like, this is the only thing you need to do, and you're safe, and you absolutely are not. Um, there's ways to be owned. There's ways to be owned on the machine at the moment. Like if you go to a public access point and there's something malicious going on with that access point, you can be owned right at the handshake when you sign into that access point. So you need to. There's other things you need to keep in mind other than
Don't trust links in emails. Don't
that.
trust.
Never,
Yeah,
don't ever
never
do
click
that.
on an email link or in a text message or anything like that. So, if you were if you were advising someone, um, and I'm not saying like give a brand name, but what would be your checklist of things in a VPN that you would think would be good? You know, what kind of features are you looking for, or would you tell someone, if you're going to get a VPN, whichever one you want, but it's got to have A, B, C.
I
WireGuard.
Yeah.
They need to have a WireGuard implementation instead of just OpenVPN implementations because they're faster.
Mm-hmm.
High speeds. And the most important one is no logging, preferably verified no logging, as in some government agency has issued a warrant to them and they have been unable to comply with the warrant simply because they don't have the information.
Yeah, and that information is out there. Uh, there are watchdogs. I mean, there's people that live for the opportunity to out a company selling a VPN that is keeping logs and sharing them with various three-letter uh, agencies throughout the world.
So we've mentioned a bit about encryption, and I suppose that kind of follows on from the discussion on VPNs. What exactly is encryption? And if me, I'm the
Okay.
noob here. How do I implement it? And should I implement it? Is there
There's a couple of different types of encryption that we're talking about here. Now, when you're talking about encrypted traffic, what encryption is it's the obfuscation of data. So, like, I have a key and I send this key to another person who adds their key that they then send back to me. And an encryption is generated based upon that, based upon those two items. They're plugged into a generator, and that makes the encryption so that they can understand it and I can understand it. And then no one else can understand that data that's being sent across that, as long as the
This is
encryption level is
very
high enough.
difficult to explain for
Yeah,
the first time
yeah.
how that
And
works.
Now that's encrypted traffic. Another thing that you have, very similar, is encrypting your drives. There are reasons to encrypt your drives, but they all involve physical access. So if someone is able to physically access your computer, because physical access is king, they can basically do anything they want unless your drive is properly encrypted. If your drive is properly encrypted, then they can have all the physical access that they want. They're not going to be able to get to your data. And it's basically the same thing. A key gets generated, either preferably using a password. There's an algorithm that encrypts your drive, and then you have a password that salts this algorithm, and um, that makes it unique to your system. As long as no one has your password to that encryption, then they should not be able to access any of the information on your drive. So physical access is no longer as horrible of a thing. It's still pretty bad, but they still can't access your information as long as you have that proper level of encryption. So those are the two main types of encryption that we're talking about when we're talking about safety.
And beyond, to
Encrypt-
go a step further with the drive level encryption, like for example, the two laptops I take on the road with me, I've got drive encryption, uh, which means without the password. It's non it's what do they call it? You've got your dual key type thing, or you've got the password encryption, the symmetrical encryption, where you've got a pass key and then you can open up a Lux encryption or something like that, which was what we're talking about here, where the entire system or the entire drive is encrypted. But beyond that, you can also encrypt files themselves, even within another encrypted drive or directory. And that's done the exact same way with either the private key and the public key. You could think of the public key as the lock, and then the private key is the key to unlock it. So you can tell the whole world what your public key is, because that's what somebody will use to encrypt something to send it to you. But only the private key, which is associated to that public key, can unlock
yeah.
that file.
So basically, they take their key or their lock, I should
Yeah,
say, and wrap it in your lock when they send it to you.
yeah.
And then you unlock it, and then you use their lock with your lock in order to create a unique encryption.
It's
That's a
yeah.
really simplified way to explain it.
It's difficult to wrap your head around it when you're not used to doing it a lot, but it is. It's this concept of having this one thing that will lock the thing, but only one other thing will unlock it. But it's worth learning. And in the case of encrypting an entire drive, if somebody got a hold of either one of my laptops I take on the road, they basically would have
A
nothing.
brick.
The
Yeah.
brick. I mean, now they could completely
Reformat.
nuke and bathe, yeah, but that's fine. They've got nothing because
Yeah.
I needed the whole thing encrypted because I've got all my WireGuard configs on the root directory, which
Because the
gets me
data
back
is
home.
more valuable than the machine.
Absolutely,
It's what
because
you can protect when someone has physical
yeah,
access. Because, yeah, I'll do the same thing. Anything that I'm planning on moving around a lot, any machine that I'm planning on taking to various locations, that's going to be encrypted. Some of my home computers that don't really have anything I care about, I don't expect anybody to have physical access, so I don't encrypt. But that's laziness because it doesn't take that much extra.
yeah, it probably is because I don't
So what's
encrypt anything here at home, and if somebody broke into the house while I'm not here and got this, they'd own me.
Yeah.
so what kind of implementation works best with Linux?
Lux.
Well, they all do. I just use the command line tools are basically part of your. Uh, they basically come with any distribution you get nowadays. Like GPG is an implementation of the PGP, which stands for Pretty Good Encryption, which is kind of the industry standard for encryption these days. And then you can choose the algorithms you want to use. I always use an AES 256 algorithm, which means in theory, a quantum computer couldn't even crack it. That's a big
Let's
thing
not,
to
but
know.
let's not try that out, shall we?
Yeah, let's not, because you will run the minute quantum computers come online. Basically, all of our regular encryption becomes instantly obsolete. Like all of our SSH keys and everything, a quantum computer can crack all of those in minutes. But a 256 algorithm kind of negates that. That's yeah,
That's going off into the weeds a
yeah,
little
that
bit. I
is.
mean, but you've already mentioned already a little bit about passwords and authentication keys and stuff like that. I mean, I think a lot of things when it comes to passwords, we're all guilty of it. We just don't make as good passwords. We copy our passwords. We use variations of the same password in lots of different places. And I'm sure there is a website, and I want to say it's from the EFF, but I might be
They're all over the
wrong.
place.
Yeah, it was saying basically because one of the things that people will say, you could have good password hygiene. Use your special characters and your numbers and all that sort of stuff. 10, 11, 12 characters long. But we're human beings, right? And at the end of the day, if you make things too complicated, there's two things you can do: either make things slightly less complicated or pass off that to something else. So one of the things is using a password manager, like Bitwarden, like we mentioned earlier, which I've been using for years now. KeyPass is another one. There's lots of other proprietary ones out there. But yes, there is this source, and I think it's the EFF, where they basically put combinations of words together which are easy to remember but very difficult to crack. I
I've
think
read
it's
those articles.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's three words which are completely unrelated, which wouldn't
That sounds like
randomly
the way
come
I
together.
generate my passwords. Are pretty close.
I When I was at university, there was this thing going around saying that the way that the secret services come up with passwords is that when they're doing it, they look around them to see something, and they just find something which has a something written, and they'll just use that as the password because it's going to be as random as you get. And so,
Well,
which I
if
thought
you're
was
if you're
still a little
generating
bit dodgy.
if you're generating your own passwords, find a book. Find a book, any book. Pick a book. Just thumb through it at random. Pick a page. Point to a section. Find the longest word in that section. Use the first half of that word. Flip through it again. Find another section. Find another word. Use the last half of that word. Put some symbols in the middle. Put some numbers on the end.
It's not that difficult, really.
If you're generating your own, granted, then you have to memorize that. And it's probably better to use some kind of manager that generates truly random character sets in order to be the best protected. I mean, because yeah, there are lists of the most commonly used passwords. There's entire brute force libraries that you can just throw at a password in order to crack it eventually. So if you're using anything like a regular password, then yeah, that will got eventually.
I've always just kind of went by my rule of thumb has always been any password a human being can remember, a computer can crack in seconds. Um, is that completely true? I don't know. People seem to have all different levels at which they can understand things, but it's kind of it's kind of been useful to me to keep in mind that no matter how unobvious something might be to us, there's even tools out there made to crack
Yeah.
passwords for Wi-Fi and things like that. And they're all based on the same concept of dictionary words. And there is a finite number of dictionary words. there is a finite number of ways to put them together. And if that, as long as that's the case, then computers are able to figure these things out. Does that mean it's bad hygiene? No, not necessarily. If you're going to use passwords that are complicated but yet still rememberable, I would say good hygiene would be to refresh those passwords regularly
Yep. Change
and
them.
change
And don't
them
repeat them.
and don't, yeah. Oh God, rule of thumb, don't repeat them.
Look,
Yes.
if one site like Facebook for per se gets owned and they get your password from there, and that's the same password you use on your banking site or any other site, believe me, these people know how people work, and they're going to go and test things, and they're going to
Yeah.
try and use the same username, and they're going to try and use the same password on as many sites as possible and see if you're stupid.
Because a lot of
Yeah.
people are.
Yeah. And, it's the amount of time, we think of ourselves as nerds and geeks and, as we've, discussed today, all of us have been done over because we just
Oh yeah.
haven't done, we haven't practiced what we're preaching here. It's a constant effort to keep with this, to keep yourself secure online. Cool. Any
There's no such
final
thing
thoughts?
as 100% security.
Yeah, very true. I was going to say, any final thoughts before we move on?
Keep your passwords up to date. Watch what you're doing. Don't click on links, especially in text messages. No matter how. I mean, in fact, you could probably just teach yourself to think, no matter how urgent it may seem. In fact, the more urgent the message might seem, the more somebody is trying to pull one over on you. Don't ever respond to people on the internet or in text messages or even on the phone getting in touch with you and telling you we need you to pay this money right now or hit this link and
Look,
Mm.
go fix your password.
never, never trust anybody that calls you and immediately asks for you to verify your identity, such
Yeah.
as your
Oh,
bank. So if your
never.
bank calls you, and it does happen sometimes, if your bank calls you, assume it's not your bank calling you and turn around and say, I will call the bank back and verify this, and I will go through their system to get back
Yeah,
to you.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Very, very true. The other thing, I mean, what I would finish off with is keep an eye on your transactions. It's not, if somebody gets hold of your credit card details or your bank details, it's quite likely that they're not going to make a massive purchase. There might be a small 5, 10, $50 quid, whatever transactions. Keep an eye on your transactions. Keep an eye on your transaction history. Something which, again, looks a bit out of place. Keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on the less tech savvy people. You are only, what's that phrase? A chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Yep.
And you can have all the implementations that you in the world, but if there are other people in your family or whatever who are less technologically savvy, that can spell disaster. Joe, any final words?
Nope.
Cool. All right then.
All right, moving on. Vibrations from the ether. We got no love this week. Send us email.
No love. No love. How can I sleep at night?
Send us email.
Yeah.
Mintcast at
Please.
mintcast.org.
We're very needy people.
Need your love. Validation.
We need your loving. Sorry.
All right,
Mm.
moving on to check this out. And we do have a couple of things in check this out. The first one is a video on VPNs from YouTube.
Yep. I'm not going to say that it's the gospel truth. I know a lot of people have said that there's problems with it, but it's an interesting video nonetheless to kind of get the idea of the issues and the concepts involved. So I learned a bit from it, to be fair.
And
And
then
then
there's
there's
another
something. Yeah, there's another one. What's the other one?
7 Linux commands just for fun. And it does seem interesting. This is from both.org, written by Don Watkins, and the commands are steam locomotive, fireplace, yes, fortune, lolcat, figlet and banner, and eSpeak. And eSpeak is a command to add speech capabilities to your command line funnies. Not eSpeak. Note, eSpeak is no longer developed and has been replaced by eSpeak NG, which has support for over 100 languages. Both programs are in the Mint repositories, and there is a Wikipedia link. Excuse me. On to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us an email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram and Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. Links in the show notes. Our next episode is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, May 26, 2024. Link in the show notes. Next roundtable live stream 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, May 18th, 2024. Link in the show notes to convert that to your time zone. Next roundtable live stream 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, June 1st, 2024. Link in the show notes to convert that to your time zone. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. On to our wrap up. If you like the sound of my voice, I'm Joe, and you can catch me on a couple of my other podcasts. That's the Linux Links Tech Show at tllts.org. I'm also on Linux Lugcast, which is at linuxlugcast.com, or you can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org. Moss couldn't be here with us today. There are links in the show notes to contact him. That's at Full Circle Weekly News, Distro Hoppers Digest, Bard Moss at pm.me, and on Mastodon, he is at Zyvala at hostux.social. Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@midcast.org. I'm bill_h on Discord, at WCHauser3, at fostodon.org on Mastodon. Also, check out my other two podcasts, Linux OTC and Three Fat Truckers. Links to both of those in the show notes. Majid?
Yeah, so you can email me directly at drmajid@mincast.org. I'm the Atypical Doctor on Instagram and Threads. There's the Atypical Doctor podcast on Spotify, and I'm also on Linux OTC. Eric couldn't be with us today. He's unfortunately unwell, and we pray that he gets better soon. But you can hear and see him on this and Linux OTC, as well as Linux Saloon and Linux Lookcast streams. And there are email addresses, the Discord, etc. in the show notes on other ways of getting hold of it.
Now, before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintcast possible. Bill for our audio editing, archive.org for hosting our audio files, Hopstar for our logo, and KnitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for a lot, including our time syncs and various other contributions. Bill once again for hosting the server which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. Also, the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks,
Clem.
Clem. And
And
company.
go.
And wrap.
Good show. Good show. 3 hours.
Fantastic.
Almost exactly.
Yeah, a minute under 3 hours.